Forget one for all. Imagine Deku not with a quirk, but with a cursed technique from Jujutsu Kaisen. How does his journey at UA and change when he's mastering a volatile power instead of super strength? And get ready to see Deku confront the darkness of cursed energy and potentially clash with All for One using a domain expansion. Let's jump right into the video.
Midoriya Izuku had spent his whole life learning how to be brave without the thing that made bravery look easy. He had notebooks full of heroes, angles of approach, rescue routes, the way MT. Lady shifted her weight before a kick, the way Endeavor always positioned civilians behind him like his body was a wall. He had charts, sketches, little red arrows and N.O.T.E. watch hands, scribbled in the margins like they were holy scripture. And he had, tucked behind all of that careful study, the quiet ache of being the only kid in his class whose future was treated like a joke. UA. Bakugo Katsuki laughed like the letters themselves were funny. Don't make me puke. The classroom roared with it, snickers, whispers, the satisfied sound of a story everyone already knew. Quirkless boy dreams too big. Quirkless boy gets put back in his place. Izuku's fingers tightened around his notebook. The cover was worn smooth from years of being opened too quickly, shut too fast, hidden too often. He stared at Bakugo's back, at the confident way he moved, like the world stepped aside for him automatically. Like he had an invisible force field. Izuku swallowed. I can try, he said, voice small but steady. Bakugo's palm exploded with a crackle. Not a big blast, not a show. Just a casual pop of heat and warning. Like flicking a lighter close to someone's face. I said don't make me puke. Bakugo repeated. He leaned down so only Izuku could hear the next part. Jump off the roof, he whispered, smiling. Maybe you'll be born with a quirk in your next life. Izuku didn't answer. If he did, his voice would break. If he didn't, they'd call him coward anyway. So he did what he always did, he held himself together, nodded too politely, and waited for the bell like it was a rescue helicopter. When school ended, he walked home with his shoulders hunched and his heart too loud. The winter air bit at his cheeks, sharp and clean, the kind of cold that normally helped him think. But today the cold felt wrong. Like it didn't belong to the sky. Like it was crawling out of the ground. Izuku passed the usual streets, convenience stores, vending machines, the old couple who argued affectionately outside the bakery. His city had always been loud with quirks. A man with floating cigarettes, a woman whose hair drifted like jellyfish tentacles, a kid zooming by on tiny wheels in his heels. Normal. That was the problem. Normal meant nobody looked too closely at anything that didn't fit. If something felt bad, you assumed it was stress. If something looked ugly, you assumed it was a villain. If someone died, you assumed a hero would handle it. Izuku turned down a side street, the shortcut he always took. It cut behind an old construction site that had been temporarily paused, for so long the fences looked permanent. The moment he got near it, his stomach tightened. Not fear. Not the usual tightness. More like nausea. A pressure behind his eyes, like he'd stared at the sun too long. His skin prickled. He slowed without meaning to. His feet kept moving, but smaller steps. The fence was covered in warning signs. Danger. No entry. But there were other markings too. Sprayed on in messy black paint. Not letters. Not symbols he recognized. Just spirals and slashes that made his gaze slide away when he tried to focus on them. Izuku stopped. He didn't know why. The air here smelled like wet metal. He listened. Cars passed in the distance. A dog barked. A train rattled over tracks. And under all of it, so faint it could have been his imagination. A whisper. Like someone speaking through a wall. Izuku frowned and leaned closer to the fence. The whisper sharpened. It wasn't words. It was a feeling of words. Like the shape of someone's hatred pressed into sound. His heart began to race. His hand trembled as he reached for the fence. A shout cut through the air. Help! Izuku snapped around. Down the street, under the shadow of an overpass, someone had fallen. A man, maybe office worker age, suit torn, one arm flailing like he couldn't find the ground beneath him. People were backing away, wide-eyed, phones out. But not filming the man. Filming what was dragging him. At first, Izuku thought it was a villain's quirk, some kind of elastic shadow. Then he saw the thing attached to the man's leg. It wasn't a hand. It was too many hands. Pale fingers, overlapping and fused like wax, melted into a shape that remembered being human. The arm wasn't skin, it was something like tar and sewage, wrapped around bone-thin wrists that shouldn't bend that way. It moved like an animal drowning, desperate and violent. The man screamed again, and Izuku's vision tunneled. Nobody was moving to help. They were waiting for a hero. Because that was the rule. Heroes solve it. Civilians watch. Izuku's legs moved before his brain could argue with them. Wait. He shouted, voice cutting through the crowd. Sir, hold on. Someone grabbed his sleeve. Kid, don't. Izuku jerked free. He ran. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to stop, to be sensible, to remember he was quirkless, to remember he was weak. But he'd lived his whole life being told weakness meant stay out of the way. And he hated that. He reached the man just as the thing yanked again. The suit man's head cracked against the pavement. Blood dotted the concrete. Izuku's breath hitched. Okay. Think. Rescue first. Always rescue first. He grabbed the man under the shoulders and tried to pull. The man was heavier than he looked. Dead weight. Panic weight. Izuku's boots slid. The thing dragging him tightened. And the closer Izuku got to it, the more the air changed. The cold deepened until it felt like the inside of a freezer. His teeth clicked. The world dulled, like someone had turned down the saturation on reality. The crowd's noise grew distant. Like Izuku had stepped into a bubble. The thing turned. Izuku couldn't explain how he knew it was looking at him, because it didn't have eyes. Its face was a smear of blackness with too many faint impressions of mouths, all screaming silently at once. It smelled like rotten smoke and something sweet gone rancid. Izuku froze. This wasn't a villain. Villains were human. This was. His thoughts scattered like paper in wind. The thing lunged. Hands shot forward, reaching for his throat. Izuku didn't dodge. He couldn't. He flinched, sure. His shoulders rose. His hands came up instinctively. His heart thudded so hard it hurt. And then, the hands stopped. Not because they chose to. Because they couldn't reach him. The Ri was a space between the thing's fingers and Izuku's skin, thin as a hair, thick as an ocean. The fingers trembled, straining, like they were pushing against invisible glass. Izuku stared. The air between them shimmered, not like heat waves, not like energy. More like, distance itself had become real. The hands scraped and slid and still could not touch him. Izuku's breath came out in a ragged gasp. What? The thing shuddered. Furious. It pulled back, then slammed forward harder. Still nothing. Izuku's knees nearly buckled. Because he felt it. Not the hands. Something else. A pressure behind his ribs. Like a second heartbeat waking up. A dark warmth crawling through his veins, heavy and electric, like panic distilled into liquid. Cursed. If he had the words, he would have called it that. Instead, his brain grabbed at the only comparison it had. It felt like when Bakugo set off an explosion right beside his face. Only this time the explosion was inside him. The thing tried again. Izuku reacted without thinking. Get away. His voice cracked, and something in the air bent. The space between them didn't just stop the hands. It shoved them back, not with force, with distance. Like reality took a step away. The thing skidded across the pavement, limbs flailing, leaving a smear of black residue like an oil spill. Izuku's eyes widened. The crowd screamed. Someone yelled, a quirk. Izuku didn't were shaking too hard. The suit man groaned, half-conscious, eyes unfocused. Izuku tightened his grip and hauled him backward, inch by inch, away from the thing. The moment he moved, the invisible gap in front of him flickered. The cold pressure in his chest sputtered. The thing noticed. It launched itself forward again, faster this time, more desperate. Izuku stumbled. The gap wavered. For a terrifying instant, he felt the hands get close. Close enough that the air between them burned. His skin prickled like 1,000 needles. Izuku's mind snapped into clarity. If that touches me, he didn't finish the thought. He clenched his jaw, forced his shaking breath to steady. Like he'd read somewhere about snipers. Like he'd practiced calming down before exams. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. The pressure in his chest responded, thickening, stabilizing. The gap became solid again. The thing's hands slammed into nothing. Izuku yanked the suit man back another meter. A siren wailed in the distance. Finally. Heroes. The thing recoiled, shivering. Not scared. Hungry. It looked at the crowd now. At their fear. Their phones. Their screams. And Izuku understood something with sick certainty. It liked this. Fear fed it. The crowd's panic wasn't just noise. It was fuel. Izuku swallowed bile. The thing's face turned back toward him. It didn't have eyes, but Izuku felt seen anyway. Like it could taste him. Like it knew something had changed. The pressure in Izuku's chest surged again, answering that attention. Not happy. Not proud. It felt like anger. A sharp, cold anger that didn't belong to him. Izuku's hands tightened around the suit man's shoulders. No, he whispered. The word wasn't for the thing. It was for the feeling inside him. The sirens were closer now. A hero would arrive any second. All he had to do was hold out. But the thing lunged again, ignoring him. Straight for the crowd. Izuku's mind blanked. He let go of the suit man. He stepped forward. The gap flared. But it wasn't enough. The thing was wide, writhing, too many limbs, too many angles. It could slip around him. Izuku's throat tightened. Think like a hero. His eyes darted. There. A loose metal signpost embedded near the sidewalk. His hand shot out. He didn't grab it. He reached. And something invisible reached with him. The signpost trembled, then ripped out of the ground with a shriek of metal. The crowd screamed louder. Izuku didn't even understand what he'd done. He swung the post like a bat. Not at a human. Not at a villain. At a nightmare. The post passed through black residue like cutting through smoke. The thing shrieked. No sound, but the air vibrated with the feeling of it. The hands spasmed, recoiled. Izuku swung again. The post hit the pavement. Cracked concrete. The pressure in Izuku's chest spiked like a warning light. Too much. Too fast. His vision blurred at the edges. His stomach rolled. The cold in the air was now inside him too, crawling up his spine. He could feel it. The gap. The pulling, the bending. It wasn't free. It cost something. The thing jerked toward him one last time, furious. Izuku lifted the post again. And the gap flickered. He felt the hands almost touch him. Panic exploded. Not normal panic. A dense, crushing dread that didn't feel like his own emotion. It felt like a storm poured into his skull. His knees buckled. The post slipped from his fingers. The world tilted. The thing surged forward. A voice boomed from above. Back off. A blur of motion. Someone landed between Izuku and the thing, the pavement cracking under their feet. A pro-hero. Cape. Mask. The whole silhouette of safety. The hero threw a punch that should have sent a villain flying. It hit the thing, and passed through like air. The hero froze for a fraction of a second. What the? The thing's hands twisted around the hero's arm. The hero yanked back, startled, and the black residue clung like tar. Izuku's heart lurched. The hero couldn't hit it. Because it wasn't solid. Because it wasn't. Izuku's brain tried to label it and failed. His vision swam. He heard sirens. Shouts. More heroes arriving. He heard someone yelling at the crowd to move back. And under it all, louder now. That whisper. Not from the fence. From inside his own chest. It hummed like a distant engine. A promise. A warning. Izuku's body went cold. His legs gave out. He fell to his knees, then forward. Cheek hitting the pavement. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was the thing turning its faceless head toward him, as if memorizing his scent. As if deciding, you. He woke up to fluorescent lights. His first thought was, hospital. His second thought was, I'm alive. His third thought slammed into him so hard he sat up too fast. What was that? Pain bloomed behind his eyes. He hissed and pressed a hand to his forehead. A nurse rushed over. Easy. You've got a mild concussion. You're lucky. Where's the man? Izuku blurted. The one who was dragged, did he? He's stable. The nurse said quickly. You did something. The heroes said you saved him. Izuku's breath caught. Saved him. But he hadn't punched a villain. He hadn't outpowered anyone. He'd changed distance. His hand trembled as he looked down at it. Normal fingers. Normal skin. But he could still feel it, faintly, like an echo. That pressure in his chest. Not gone. Just sleeping. The nurse adjusted his IV. A detective might want to talk to you later. And, UA contacted us. Izuku's head snapped up. UA. The nurse nodded, uneasy. They asked for a report. Something about, unregistered ability. Izuku's throat went dry. Unregistered. Ability. not quirk. The nurse didn't notice the way Izuku's blood turned to ice at that distinction. Because Izuku did notice, he didn't know how, but he knew. What happened under that overpass wasn't a quirk. Quirks made sense in this world. They had categories, limits, registrations. This was something else. Something older. Something hungry. The nurse left. The room quieted. Izuku lay back slowly, staring at the ceiling like it might explain him. His hero notebook was on the chair nearby, scuffed from being carried in a rush. Someone had placed it neatly. Like it mattered. Izuku reached for it with shaking hands. The cover opened. A folded piece of paper slipped out and fluttered onto his blanket. Izuku froze. He hadn't put that there. He picked it up. No logo. No hospital stamp. Just plain paper with a single line written in sharp, clean handwriting. Don't call it a quirk. And don't turn it on unless you're ready to. Never touch the world the same way again. Izuku's breath stopped. He stared at the words until they blurred. Then he looked at the window. Outside, the city moved like nothing had happened. Cars, people, lights, normal. But he felt it now, beneath normal. Like a shadow under the floorboards. Izuku clenched the note in his fist. And deep in his chest, that second heartbeat stirred, quietly pleased, quietly awake. Izuku learned two things the moment he got home from the hospital. The first was that his mom had a whole new shade of panic unlocked. The second was that his body now had opinions about distance. Inko Midoriya practically sprinted from the kitchen the second the apartment door opened. Her socks slid on the floor. Her hands flew out, already shaking, eyes glossy. Izuku. He stepped forward, instinctively leaning into her like he always did, because no matter how old he got, his mom's hugs were the safest place in the universe. Her arms wrapped around him. And stopped. Not on his shoulders. Not on his back. They stopped in the air, as if there was a pane of glass pressed between them. Inko gasped. Her arms trembled, trying to close the gap that suddenly didn't exist and absolutely did. Izuku froze. His brain couldn't decide whether to scream or apologize. Mom, I didn't. Dee touched something hot. Her hands hovered near her chest, fingers flexing, eyes wide with raw confusion. Izuku, she whispered. Why couldn't I? Izuku stared at the empty space between them. It was nothing. Literally nothing. Just air. And yet it felt like the world had put a rule there. No. Something inside his ribs pulsed, faint, cold, alert. That second heartbeat. His throat tightened. He remembered the hands under the overpass, scraping and straining at nothing. He remembered how his panic made it flicker. He swallowed hard and forced himself to breathe like he was defusing a bomb. In. 2. 3. Out. 2. 3. The pressure inside him eased, like a clenched fist slowly opening. I think it turns on when I'm scared, Izuku said, voice too small for the size of what he was admitting. Or when I think something's going to hurt me. Inko's eyes softened with heartbreak and terror at the same time, which somehow made it worse. Oh, Izuku, she stepped forward more slowly this time, like approaching a scared animal. Can you let me hug you? Yeah, Izuku whispered immediately. Yes, I want to. He focused on her, not on danger, not on the empty space. On her warmth, on the smell of her shampoo, on the way she always said his name like it mattered. The pressure in his chest shifted. Something inside him unlocked. Inko's arms closed around him properly this time, and Izuku nearly collapsed from relief. But even inside the hug, he felt it, like his body was holding a door open with shaking hands, and if he slipped for even a second, the door would slam shut again. Inko clutched him tighter. Don't ever scare me like that again, she said, voice breaking. They said you ran at that thing, like you were a hero already. Izuku's eyes stung. I didn't think, he admitted. You did, Inko insisted fiercely, and that was the most terrifying part of love. She believed in him even when the universe didn't. Izuku closed his eyes. The note in his pocket felt heavier than a brick. That night, he didn't sleep. He lay on his futon with his hero notebook open, but the pages blurred. His mind kept replaying the moment his mom's hug hit an invisible wall. It wasn't just scary. It was wrong. He reached out toward his bedside lamp and turned it off. The room went dark. Then, because his brain hated him, he reached out again, slowly, carefully, and tried to touch the wall. His fingers met paint and drywall like normal. Okay. So it wasn't always on. He sat up and stared at his hands. Normal. Just hands. He tried to recreate the feeling. He thought about the overpass. The thing's hands. The smell of rot. Instantly, the pressure in his chest rose like a tide. Cold electricity crawled up his arms. His skin prickled. He lifted a pencil and flicked it toward himself. The pencil flew, spinning, point first, and then, inches from his nose, it stopped. Not like it got caught. Not like it hit something. It stopped like the world decided, very politely, that it wasn't allowed to be closer. Izuku's breath hitched. The pencil hovered there, quivering, trapped in an invisible in-between. He leaned forward. The pencil slid back. His heart hammered. He leaned again. It slid again. Always the same tiny distance, like a cursed joke. Izuku reached out to grab it. But his fingers couldn't quite close around it. It kept retreating just enough to avoid contact, like he was trying to catch a fish with bare hands. His stomach rolled. I can't even, he whispered. The pencil dropped to the floor the moment his concentration wavered, clattering loud in the silence. Inko stirred in the next room. Izuku froze, guilt slamming into him. He forced the pressure down again. Forced his breathing steady, forced his body to stop acting like it was under attack. Mom can't know I'm scared of my own hands. Because if she knew, she'd cry. And if she cried, he'd break. He grabbed his notebook, flipped to a fresh page, and wrote in frantic, shaking scribbles. Defense. Automatic when I anticipate harm. Stops objects before contact. Looks like air barrier, but feels like distance. Can allow contact by focusing on trust. Cost. Headache, nausea. Not a quirk. He stared at the last line until his eyes burned. Then he pulled the folded note out of his pocket and unfolded it again. Don't call it a quirk. He swallowed. If it wasn't a quirk, then what was it? And who the heck wrote this? He flipped the paper over. Nothing. No signature. No hint. Just the feeling that someone had been close enough to his life to slip this into his notebook without being seen. His skin crawled. Izuku tucked the note under his pillow like that would protect him from it. The next morning, he didn't even get to finish breakfast before the doorbell rang. Inko flinched so hard she almost dropped the miso soup. Izuku felt the pressure in his chest twitch, waking up like a guard dog. Inko set the bowl down with trembling hands and shuffled to the door. Izuku, stay behind me, she said automatically, and then realized what she'd said and looked guilty. Izuku forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Okay, Mom. She opened the door. A man stood there in a neat coat with calm eyes and a face that looked like it was designed to be trusted. Next to him was another figure, tall. Wrapped in a black scarf even indoors, hair messy in a way that looked like he'd given up on life somewhere around last Tuesday. The calm man bowed politely. Midoriya Inko. I'm Detective Tsukauchi. Thank you for seeing us. Inko's eyes widened. A detective. The man with the scarf didn't bow. He barely moved at all. His eyes swept past Inko, locked onto Izuku. And something in that gaze made Izuku's spine go straight. Not fear. Assessment. Like he was a test paper with wrong answers. I'm Aizawa Shota, the scarf man said, voice flat. UA. Hi. Hero course. Izuku's heart punched his ribs. UUA. Inko squeaked. Aizawa's eyes didn't leave Izuku. We have questions. Izuku's mouth went dry. Detective Tsukauchi's smile was gentle in a way that felt practiced. Don't worry. This isn't an arrest. It's a safety check. Inko looked like she might faint. Safety. My son, he's a good boy, he just. I know, Tsukauchi said, and his tone held real sincerity. That's why we're here. The incident yesterday wasn't typical. Aizawa stepped inside without being invited, like a cat that lived there now. His capture scarf shifted slightly, almost alive. Izuku felt the pressure in his chest rise again. He didn't want it to. It just did. Aizawa noticed immediately. Good, Aizawa said, like Izuku had proven a point. It reacts. Inko's face paled. React? What are you? Aizawa's eyes sharpened. Midoriya, when you stopped that thing yesterday, what did you do? Izuku swallowed. I don't know. It wouldn't touch me. Aizawa's scarf twitched. Show me, Aizawa said. Inko snapped, you can't just. Tsukauchi lifted a hand. Aizawa, maybe we explain first. Aizawa sighed like explanations were a personal insult. Fine. He looked at Izuku again. Your ability is not registered. It did not behave like a quirk. It did not respond to pro-heroes the way a villain's quirk would. And one of the heroes on scene reported something important. Izuku's stomach sank. Aizawa continued, voice steady. They said when they tried to punch it, their fist passed through. Like it wasn't physical. Izuku nodded slowly. Yeah, it didn't feel real. And yet it dragged a man across the pavement, Tsukauchi added softly. So it can interact with the world when it wants to. Inko's hands flew to her mouth. That's impossible. Aizawa leaned forward slightly. It's possible. It happened. He sat back, eyes narrowing. Now, called erasure. Izuku blinked. I know, sir. Aizawa's eyes flickered with faint surprise, then annoyance. Of course you do. He met Izuku's gaze dead on. If you activate your ability, I should be able to erase it, if it's a quirk. Izuku's heart began to race again. Aizawa's voice dropped. If I can't erase it, that means UA can't shut you down in an emergency. Inko turned white. Shut him down. Tsukauchi's smile had vanished. Inko-san, from a public safety standpoint, an ability that can't be regulated is terrifying. Izuku's throat tightened. He'd spent his whole life wishing for power. He hadn't expected power to make people look at him like a problem. Aizawa stood. Activate it. Inko grabbed his sleeve. Izuku, you don't have to. Izuku looked at his mom's shaking hands. Then at Aizawa's calm, tired eyes. Then at the detective, whose expression said please don't die. Izuku nodded once. I'll try. He stepped forward and raised his hand. He thought of danger. He thought of being hit. He thought of Bakugo's explosions. The pressure in his chest surged, cold and sharp, and the air around him felt thicker. Not physically. Conceptually. Like the room had gained an extra layer of rules. Aizawa's eyes flashed red. Izuku felt it, like a stare sliding over him, trying to peel something away. Nothing changed. Aizawa's eyelids twitched. Again, he said, quieter. Izuku kept the pressure up. Aizawa's erasure stayed locked. Nothing. Aizawa exhaled slowly. Tsukauchi muttered, so it's true. Inko made a tiny, broken sound. That means. Aizawa looked at Inko, and for the first time his voice softened a fraction. It means your son isn't dealing with a quirk. Izuku's skin went cold. He thought of the note. Don't call it a quirk. He hadn't imagined it. Aizawa's gaze returned to Izuku. Turn it off. Izuku tried. But, turn it off, wasn't a switch. It was a feeling, a stance. He forced his breathing steady. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. The pressure eased. The air returned to normal. Aizawa watched carefully, like he was timing the fade. Good, he said. You can disengage. Tsukauchi rubbed his temple. That makes this complicated. Incredibly, Aizawa agreed. And dangerous. Izuku flinched. Aizawa didn't soften this time. Heroes need to touch people, Midoriya. They need to grab civilians. Carry them. Pull them out of rubble. If your ability decides nobody can reach you, you can't do your job. Izuku's chest tightened. I can allow contact. I did it with my mom. Aizawa's eyes flicked to Inko, who immediately held herself straighter, like she was ready to prove her son wasn't a monster. How? Aizawa asked. Izuku swallowed. I focused on trust. I focused on her. Like telling myself she wasn't a threat. Aizawa's scarf shifted again, a little restless. Then it's linked to intent, Aizawa murmured. Tsukauchi nodded slowly. That fits. Inko's voice was small. What is it? Then, Aizawa's eyes were unreadable. I don't know. He paused, then added, almost reluctantly, but I know enough to say this. If Midoriya enters hero society with an ability nobody understands, villains will notice. Izuku's heart thudded. Tsukauchi looked at Izuku with a serious gentleness. Midoriya-kun, do you still intend to apply to UA? Inko turned sharply. He's been dreaming of it since he was 4. Izuku spoke before fear could stop him. Yes. The word came out stronger than he felt. Aizawa studied him for a long moment. Then, as if deciding something, Aizawa reached into his pocket and tossed a small card onto the table. It slid to a stop in front of Izuku. UA. High School. Hero Course Preliminary Assessment. Date, time, location. Izuku stared at it like it might evaporate if he blinked. This isn't acceptance, Aizawa said. This is a test. Izuku nodded quickly. I understand. Aizawa's gaze sharpened. If you can't demonstrate control, you will not be allowed into the hero course. Not because you're weak, because you're unsafe. Izuku's throat tightened. He wanted to argue. He wanted to promise he'd be perfect. But the Ruth was, he wasn't sure he could control it either. So he bowed instead. Deep, respectful. Thank you for the chance, he whispered. Aizawa turned toward the door like the conversation was done. Then he stopped, half glanced back, and said something that hit Izuku harder than any insult Bakugo had ever thrown. Midoriya, if you can't touch the world, you'll never save it. And then he left. The assessment was in 2 days. 2 days to learn how to control something that wasn't a quirk and didn't care about his feelings. Which was, unfortunately, the kind of problem Izuku's brain loved. And like his life depended on it, because it did. He went to a quiet park at sunrise where the grass was wet with frost and the city hadn't fully woken up yet. He brought a bag of coins, a notebook, and a cheap plastic ball. Step 1, trigger it. Step 2, turn it off. Step 3, allow and deny contact intentionally. He started with the simplest test. He tossed a coin upward and let it fall toward his palm. The coin stopped just before touching. He frowned, throat tight, and tried again. Same result. Again. Same. By the 10th time, his head was throbbing. Okay, he whispered, voice shaking with frustration. Okay. That means it's defaulting to defense. He tried to welcome the coin. He pictured it as harmless. Friendly. A thing that belonged in his hand. The coin dropped and touched his skin. Izuku's breath caught. For a second he just stared at it, like he couldn't trust reality. Then he tried again. Coin stopped. He blinked rapidly. So it's not stable, he muttered, scribbling notes. Permission must be deliberate. Focus slips equals defense returns. Emotion spike increases defense. Headache after repeated activation. He picked up the plastic ball. He threw it at himself. It bounced off nothing, like it hit an invisible slope and rolled away. He chased it, breathing hard, frustration building. The pressure in his chest rose in response, almost excited. Like it liked being used. Izuku hated that thought. He took a deep breath. This wasn't a game. This was his future. He tried a new method. He closed his eyes and imagined a line between him and the world, like a measurement. 1 meter. Half a meter. 10 centimeters. He pictured the distance shrinking like he was pulling a tape measure back in. When he opened his eyes, he tossed the coin. It fell. It touched. It stayed. Izuku's pupils widened. That felt different. Not trust. Not calm. More like he had edited the space between him and the coin. His chest pressure buzzed. A faint hum at the edge of hearing. Izuku swallowed and whispered a word he didn't even realize he'd learned from somewhere deep in his bones. Infinity. The air seemed to still around him. He didn't know why that word fit. He just knew it did. A cold breeze passed through the trees. Izuku turned his head sharply. Someone was standing at the edge of the park, half hidden behind a vending machine. Tall, still, wearing a plain coat and dark glasses that hid their eyes completely. Izuku's heart jumped. Hello. The figure didn't move closer. When they spoke, their voice was calm, too calm, like someone describing weather. Stop thinking of it as a wall. Izuku froze. What? The figure tilted their head slightly. Walls break. Walls fail. Walls make you push. Izuku's mouth went dry. Who are you? The figure ignored the question. It's not a barrier. They continued. It's distance. Izuku's skin prickled. That was exactly what he'd felt. How do you keep practicing? The figure said, and there was something RP in their tone now, like warning wrapped top triggering it with fear. Fear makes it sloppy. Izuku took a step forward. Wait. The figure turned away. In 2 quiet strides, they were gone, moving behind the trees and out of sight like the park had swallowed them. Izuku stood there, chest pounding, staring at the spot where they'd been. His hands shook. His mind raced. That voice. That advice. It matched the note. He stumbled back to the vending machine. Looked around it. Nothing. No footprints. No sign. Just the faint chill in the air and the feeling that someone had been watching his life from a distance measured in millimeters. Izuku swallowed hard and whispered into the empty park. "Are you helping me?" No answer. Only wind. The day of the assessment, Yue looked exactly like his dreams, and nothing like his comfort. The gates were massive. The campus stretched wide. The air itself felt heavier. Like expectations had weight here. Izuku stood beside his mom at the entrance, clutching his papers with white knuckles. Inko adjusted his tie for the third time like she could protect him by making him look neat. "You'll be okay," she whispered. You always figure things out." Izuku nodded, but his stomach churned. Because this wasn't math. This wasn't strategy. This was reality bending inside his chest. A tall figure approached. Aizawa. Same scarf. Same dead tired eyes. Same vibe of a man who'd rather nap than breathe. He didn't greet Inko. He didn't smile. He looked straight at Izuku. "Follow," he said. Izuku bowed quickly. "Yes, sir." Inko grabbed Izuku's hand. Izuku squeezed back, then felt the pressure in his chest twitch. His defense wanted to rise. Not against his mom. Against the situation. He forced himself to allow the contact, held the distance straight. Edie like he was balancing a glass of water on his head. Inko let go reluctantly. "Do your best," she mouthed. Izuku nodded and followed Aizawa through the building. They walked in silence past training rooms, classrooms. Halls lined with posters about safety and hero ethics. Izuku's eyes darted everywhere, absorbing details even as fear gnawed at him. Finally, they reached a small gym-like room. A single table. A few chairs. A metal pole set into the floor. A row of simple training tools. Aizawa shut the door. The click sounded final. Aizawa turned. "Activate it." Izuku swallowed. "Yes, sir." He triggered the pressure. The air thickened. His skin prickled. Aizawa's eyes flashed red again, erasure focused like a spotlight. Nothing happened. Aizawa's jaw tightened. "Right," he muttered. "Still not a quirk." Then Aizawa grabbed the metal pole and yanked it free from its slot, holding it like a staff. Izuku's eyes widened. "Yes, sir." Aizawa swung. Not to hit him hard. Not to injure. Just enough to test. The pole swept toward Izuku's shoulder. And stopped short. The same invisible gap, clean and absolute. The pole trembled against nothing. Aizawa pushed. The pole slid, unable to close the final distance. Aizawa released pressure, then swung again, faster. "Stop. Again. Stop." Izuku's head began to ache already. Aizawa's voice was flat. "Your defense triggers on contact trajectory." Izuku swallowed. "Why yes." Aizawa tossed the pole aside and flicked his scarf. The capture weapon shot out like a living snake, whipping toward Izuku's waist. Izuku flinched. The scarf stopped too. Hovering. Quivering. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. "It works on flexible weapons too." Izuku's chest pressure buzzed like it was pleased with itself. Izuku hated it. Aizawa pulled the scarf back. Then, without warning, he tossed a water bottle at Izuku's face. Izuku yelped, then the bottle stopped, hovering inches from his nose. Izuku caught it by consciously, allowing contact at the last second. The bottle slapped into his palm. Water sloshed. His heart hammered. Aizawa watched his micro-reaction like a hawk. "You can permit," Aizawa said. "But it requires deliberate intent." Izuku nodded shakily. "Yes." Aizawa stepped closer. So close Izuku could see the faint tired lines under his eyes. Aizawa held out his hand. "Handshake," he said. Izuku's breath caught. That shouldn't be scary. But it was. Because a handshake wasn't a coin. It wasn't a bottle. It was a person. A hero. Someone who didn't trust him yet. Izuku reached out. And the gap appeared between their hands. Aizawa's fingers stopped short of Izuku's. Aizawa didn't react emotionally at all. His voice stayed calm, almost clinical. "Now allow it." Izuku swallowed hard. He tried. He pictured Aizawa as safe. But Aizawa didn't feel safe. Not because he was evil, because he was unknown, and unknown meant threat in his body's new language. His pressure spiked. The gap thickened. Izuku's eyes stung. I'm trying," he whispered. Aizawa didn't move his hand. He waited, patient in the way only someone who'd watched students fail 1,000 times could be. Izuku forced himself to breathe. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. He stopped thinking, safe. He started thinking distance. He pictured the gap shrinking, like pulling a tape measure in. 10 centimeters. 5, 2, 1. The air between their hands thinned. Then, Aizawa's fingers touched his. A handshake. Real. Warm. Solid. Izuku's chest loosened so abruptly he almost cried. Aizawa's grip was firm, not cruel. He held it for exactly 2 seconds. Then let go. Izuku didn't realize, until it ended, that he'd been holding his breath the entire time. Aizawa studied him for a long moment. You're not stable, Aizawa said. Izuku's heart sank. But you're learning, Aizawa added. Izuku blinked. Aizawa turned away, walked to the table, and wrote something on a form. He didn't look up when he spoke. This ability, whatever it is, will attract problems. Villains. Media. Fear. Fear makes it stronger, doesn't it? Izuku swallowed. I think so. Aizawa nodded once. Then you'll need discipline. The kind most people don't develop until they've already hurt someone. Izuku flinched. Aizawa's voice softened, just barely. Don't make your first mistake a fatal one. Izuku bowed deeply. Yes, sir. Aizawa slid the form across the table. Go to the entrance exam, Aizawa said. You're cleared to attempt it. Izuku's eyes widened. Really? Aizawa's expression didn't change. Don't celebrate. The exam will expose you. Izuku's smile faltered. Aizawa's gaze sharpened. If you enter that arena and you lose control, I will personally drag you out and ensure you never step into the hero course. Izuku nodded hard. I understand. Aizawa opened the door. Midoriya, he said, pausing. Izuku looked up. Aizawa's eyes were tired, but serious. Whatever this is, don't let it isolate you. Heroes die alone more often than people realize. Izuku's throat tightened. He nodded again, and as he stepped into the hallway, walking toward the entrance exam that would decide everything, he felt it. That cold pressure in his chest, stirring again. Not fear. Something else. Like anticipation. Like hunger. Izuku clenched his fists. Not you, he whispered under his breath. Me. I'm the one in control. Somewhere behind him, unseen, he could have sworn he heard a faint whisper of amusement. I looked different when you were about to be judged by it. On the outside, it was still the same towering gates, the clean campus, the heroic aura, like the whole place had been built to imitate villains through architecture alone. But from the inside, standing in a crowd of nervous applicants, shoulder to shoulder with kids who sparked and steamed and glowed, it felt like a giant mouth. And Izuku was walking straight into it. He kept his hands clenched around his admission papers so tightly the corners bent. His backpack strap dug into his shoulder. His breathing was too fast. Don't panic. Fear makes it sloppy. He repeated it like a prayer. The cold stirred anyway, like it could smell his anxiety and got hungry. Izuku swallowed and forced his breaths into a rhythm. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. The crowd shuffled forward in waves. Voices overlapped, bragging, joking, nervous laughter. A tall boy with a metallic jaw talked about how many points you needed to place high. A girl with floating hairpins said she'd wipe the whole field. A kid near the back accidentally lit his own sleeve on fire and slapped at it while his friend laughed. Normal hero society chaos. And yet, Izuku felt something underneath it. Not like the overpass. Not that suffocating rot. More like a faint static in the air. An unease that didn't belong to any one person. Like a collected press. You're the way storm clouds collected electricity. If cursed energy is born from negativity, then a place like this. His stomach rolled. He pushed the thought away. Not now. He needed to focus on what mattered. 1. Survive. 2. 3. Score enough points. 4. 5. Don't do anything that makes Aizawa drag him out by the collar. 6. He glanced down at his hero notebook sticking out of his bag. The secret note was tucked in the back like a splinter under the skin. Don't call it a quirk. His heartbeat thudded. He still didn't know what it was. But he knew it could ruin him. Or, Izuku lifted his head, eyes catching the bright UA on the wall. The symbol of everything he'd ever wanted. Or it could be the only reason he got to stand here at all. Hey! A voice snapped him out of his spiral. Izuku turned, and found himself face to face with a girl about his age, brown hair bobbing, white eyes, and a soft face that looked like it was always 1 second away from saying sorry. She pointed at him. Your papers are crumpling. Izuku looked down and yelped quietly. Oh, sorry. He loosened his grip immediately, mortified. I didn't realize. He stopped himself from rambling by force. The girl smiled, a little nervous but friendly. It's okay. I'm nervous too. I'm Uraraka Ochako. I'm Midoriya Izuku, he blurted, then bowed too deep, because apparently his body had decided panic meant formalities. Uraraka giggled. You're really polite. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck. UA is, UA. You know. Uraraka nodded quickly, eyes shining. Yeah, exactly. That warmth, human connection. Normal conversation, made the cold pressure in Izuku's chest ease a fraction. Not gone, but quieter. Like it didn't like kindness as much. A loudspeaker crackled. The crowd began to move into a large auditorium. Izuku and Uraraka flowed with the applicants, taking seats among rows of teenagers buzzing like bees. A man strode onto the stage, present mic, voice booming like a stadium announcer. He threw energy into the air like confetti. Welcome, young heroes in training. The room erupted with cheers. Izuku flinched at the volume. His head still hadn't fully forgiven him for yesterday's training. Present Mike launched into instructions, practical exam rules, points per robot, 3 types of targets, time limit. Izuku scribbled notes automatically, even though he'd already read it all. It helped him feel like he had control. Then Present Mike grinned, sharp and bright. And remember, there are no rescue points in this exam. The crowd murmured. Izuku's pen paused. Uraraka blinked, confused. No rescue points. Izuku's stomach tightened. No rescue points meant it was exactly what the world accused Hero Society of being sometimes, a flashy power contest. He forced his face neutral. Don't spiral. Just adapt. Present Mike finished with a dramatic gesture. Now get out there and smash some robots. The doors opened, and the auditorium emptied like a flood. Outside, the exam arena Ted, an artificial cityscape filled with broken roads, fake buildings, scattered obstacles, and the distant hum of machinery. Izuku stood at the entrance with a group assigned to one gate. The air smelled like oil and dust. He saw the robots in the distance, towering metal bodies, target plates, numbers stamped on their chests. His pulse jumped. He wasn't afraid of robots. He was afraid of what he would do under pressure. Someone near him cracked their knuckles. Another kid's palm sparked. Someone laughed, loud and confident. Izuku swallowed. The moment the timer started, everyone would explode forward like bullets. Could he keep up? Could he score? His ability was defense. Defense didn't earn points. Unless he got creative. He glanced around, eyes scanning terrain. Debris, pipes, rebar, broken concrete slabs. If he could use leverage, traps, angle attacks, he could still win without brute force. He just had to keep his head. Present Mike's voice blared from speakers around the arena. Ready, set, go. The gates opened. The world turned into motion. Students sprinted forward, quirks igniting everywhere, ice spreading like a tide, blasts shattering robots, wind launching bodies through the air. Izuku ran too. Not fast like them, but fast for him. He moved with purpose, eyes darting, brain calculating. A 2-pointer robot turned toward him, gears whining. Izuku raised his NDS instinctively, pressure surging in his chest. Infinity wanted to flare. He forced it into a controlled burst, label threat, and felt the air in front of him thicken into that invisible gap. The robot charged. Its metal fist swung toward his face. The fist slowed, stopped short, hovering inches away. Izuku's stomach lurched at the closeness. But he didn't panic. He pivoted, stepping around the stalled arm, and slammed his elbow into the robot's exposed joint where the armor plates met. Pain shot up his arm. Ow, okay, metal hurts. The robot's joint creaked but didn't break. Izuku grit his teeth. He needed tools. He dashed to the side, grabbed a loose metal pipe from the ground, and swung it like a bat. The pipe connected with the robot's sensor plate. The plate cracked. The robot stuttered. Izuku swung again, harder, using his hips this time like he'd studied in videos. Crack. The sensor plate shattered, and the robot collapsed with a screech. A small display near the arena edge flashed. 2 points. Izuku's heart jumped with a strange, almost embarrassing thrill. He did it. He actually did it. But the moment he celebrated, a three-pointer robot rolled around a corner and slammed into the road, shaking the ground. Izuku's excitement vanished. The robot's head turned toward him. A targeting beep echoed. Izuku's chest pressure spiked, too fast. Infinity flared, stronger, wider. The air around him chilled. His fingers tingled. The robot lunged. Its entire body slowed as it approached him, like it was trying to run through syrup. Izuku backed away, pipe raised. He swung at the sensor plate. The robot's arms swung too. Izuku's swing slowed as his concentration split. Infinity wavered. The robot's arm got closer than it should have. Izuku's skin prickled. Fear sparked. Infinity surged again like a reflex. The arm stopped. Izuku's breath came out in a harsh gasp. Offense focus weakens defense. Aizawa's warning echoed in his head, even though Aizawa hadn't said those exact words. Izuku tightened his grip on the pipe. He couldn't fight like everyone else. He couldn't smash through machines with raw power. He had to fight like Izuku. He ducked behind a fake building corner, using it as cover. The robot followed. Slower near him, faster when he widened the distance. So that's how it worked. The closer the threat got, the stronger the gap felt. Meaning, Izuku lured it. He stepped into its path. Triggered Infinity intentionally, and as the robot slowed, he sprinted past its side and jammed the pipe into a seam in its torso where armor plates overlapped. He used the pipe as leverage, twisting hard. Metal groaned. The robot's torso shifted just enough. Izuku kicked the sensor plate with everything he had. Pain exploded in his foot. But the plate cracked. He hit it again with teared. The robot collapsed. 3 points. Izuku staggered back, panting, sweat cold on his neck. His head pulsed. The pressure in his chest buzzed like an engine at idle. He looked around. Other students were racking up points faster. Demolishing robots in seconds. Izuku had earned 5 points in what felt like forever. He wasn't going to place high. Not like this. Not unless. A sudden scream cut through the noise. Izuku's head snapped toward it. Across the arena, a student had misjudged a jump. A two-pointer robot clipped their leg, sending them tumbling into rubble. No one stopped to help. Because there were no rescue points. Izuku's stomach twisted. Heroes Society rules or not, he couldn't just. He started running. The moment he committed, his chest pressure shifted. Not fear. Purpose. Infinity didn't flare wildly. It came on like a controlled breath. He reached the student, someone with a tail quirk, grimacing, trying to stand. Izuku grabbed their shoulder, allowed contact, and hauled them up. Can you move? Izuku asked fast. Why yeah. Go. Now. The student stumbled away. Izuku turned. A robot's fist was already swinging toward him. Infinity caught it, stopping it inches from his face. Izuku yanked his pipe up and smashed the sensor plate. The robot dropped. He didn't get a thank you. The student was already running. Izuku didn't need one. But as he ran again, the arena noise felt different. Less like a game, more like a battlefield. And in the middle distance, the ground shook. A massive shadow rose over the fake buildings. Izuku's blood went cold. A giant robot, bigger than the others, thicker armor. Heavy footsteps that cracked the pavement. A zero-pointer. Present Mike's voice blared, excited. Whoa, a zero-pointer has appeared. Students screamed. Some cheered and ran toward it anyway, confident. Reckless. Others panicked and fled. Izuku didn't move. Not because he was brave. Because his body had frozen with the sick awareness that this was too big. Infinity could stop a fist. Could it stop that? The zero-pointer stomped forward, crushing a fake car like a soda can. Izuku's breath hitched. And then he saw her. Uraraka. She was sprinting away, eyes wide, but the ground beneath her collapsed, debris from a broken building shifting under the tremors. She fell hard. A slab of concrete tilted and slid toward her like a guillotine. Uraraka threw her hands up, trying to activate her quirk. But fear made her timing sloppy. Her fingers missed the slab. The concrete slid faster. Izuku's mind went empty. His body moved. He sprinted. Every step pounded. The cold pressure in his chest rose. Not as panic, but as a roar. Not hungry. Protective. He reached Uraraka just as the slab was about to slam down. Izuku threw himself between her and the falling debris. Infinity exploded out of him, wide. Absolute, a perfect no carved into space. The slab hit the invisible gap and stopped dead, hovering inches above Izuku's back. Dust burst into the air. The ground shuddered. Izuku's knees nearly buckled under the mental strain of holding it. The slab wasn't touching him, but it felt like trying to hold up a building with his brain. Uraraka stared up at him, stunned. Midoriya. Don't move. Izuku choked out. I'll get you out. He turned his head, eyes darting. The slab was suspended by Infinity, but Infinity wasn't a support beam. If his focus slipped, it would drop. His head was already screaming, pain behind his eyes like knives. He forced himself to breathe. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. He needed leverage. He spotted a rebar rod sticking out of the rubble. Grabbed it, permitted contact, and jammed it under the slab like a brace. His hands shook so hard he almost dropped it. Uraraka scrambled, trying to crawl out, but the ground shifted again. The zero-pointer's footsteps were closer now. Each stomp sent vibrations through the rubble and through Izuku's bones. The slab wobbled. Infinity flickered. Izuku's vision blurred. No, he whispered through clenched teeth. Uraraka's eyes filled with panic. I can make it float. Do it. Izuku snapped, then immediately regretted his tone. Sorry, please, do it. Uraraka reached up, fingers trembling. She touched the slab. Her quirk activated. The slab went weightless. The pressure in Izuku's chest eased instantly, like a tendon snapping back into place. Infinity didn't need to hold it anymore. Izuku almost collapsed from relief. Uraraka crawled free, coughing. I did it. Izuku grabbed her arm, allowed contact, and hauled her to her feet. Run, he shouted. Uraraka stumbled, then looked back. What about you? Izuku looked up. The zero-pointer loomed, its massive arm lifting like a crane. It wasn't aiming at him specifically. It was just swinging through the area, destroying everything in its path. Civilians weren't here, but students were, and debris didn't care who it crushed. Izuku's brain did the math in a flash. He couldn't destroy it. He couldn't even slow it for long without collapsing. But he could. He could buy time. He stepped forward. Uraraka grabbed his sleeve. Midoriya, don't. Izuku's voice came out steady in a way he didn't feel. You're safe now. Go. Uraraka stared at him. Then her grip tightened. And in a small, shaky voice she said the thing that stabbed Izuku right in the heart. But you're not. Izuku swallowed. He didn't have an answer. He turned back to the zero-pointer. Its fist descended. A skyscraper of metal moving straight at him. The air screamed. Izuku triggered Infinity fully. The cold pressure in his chest surged like a tidal wave. The fist slowed, then stopped, inches from his face. The sheer size of it made the gap feel like it was burning through his skull. His legs shook. His eyes watered from pain. He could feel every ounce of his focus being eaten just to maintain that impossible distance. Uraraka screamed his name. Other students shouted in confusion. Somewhere, far away, Present Mike's voice cut through the speakers, suddenly less playful. Hey, move. Get out of there. Izuku couldn't move. Not while holding it. Not while being the only thing keeping that fist from turning a group of students into paste. His vision tunneled. Black spots danced at the edges. His head felt like it might split open. And then, through the pain, Izuku realized something. The zero-pointer wasn't pushing through Infinity. It couldn't. It was just stuck. Its momentum had nowhere to go. Which meant, Izuku's eyes snapped to the ground. A cracked section of pavement behind the zero-pointer. A weakened support column. If he could redirect the robot's balance. But he didn't have blue. He didn't have a pull. He had only a rule. You can't reach me. So he did the only thing he could. He stepped sideways, just one carafe. All step, while keeping Infinity locked on the fist. The robot's arm remained halted. But its torso rotated slightly to follow, trying to complete the strike. That shift threw its weight. The ground under its foot cracked further. Izuku took another step. The robot adjusted again. The cracked pavement gave way. The zero-pointer's ankle slipped into the broken road with a metallic crunch. The robot lurched, its massive body listing. The fist, still aimed toward Izuku, dragged the robot's balance forward. And the machine toppled, crashing into the fake building beside it with an earth-shaking slam. Dust erupted. The arena trembled. Students screamed and scattered. Izuku stood there, shaking, infinity still active out of sheer reflex. Then his focus shattered. The cold pressure in his chest snapped like an overstretched wire. Infinity dropped. The world rushed back in. Sound slammed into him. The pain behind his eyes spiked. Izuku's knees gave out. He fell hard, palms scraping pavement. His breath came in ragged gasps. He heard footsteps running toward him. Uraraka's voice, close now, terrified. "Midu okay?" Izuku tried to answer. His mouth opened. No sound came out. His vision blurred. As darkness crept in, he saw something strange. High up on a distant observation platform, behind protective glass. A tall figure in a plain coat. Dark glasses. Watching him. Still. And for a split second, Izuku felt that same sensation as the park. Like someone was measuring the distance between them. Judging how close Izuku was getting to something dangerous. Then the world went black. He woke up on a bench near the arena entrance, surrounded by medical staff and exhausted students. His head throbbed like it had been hit with a hammer. A recovery girl assistant offered him water. "Easy, honey. You overexerted yourself." Izuku blinked, trying to sit up. The exam. Did I? A nearby screen flashed results. Names scrolled. Izuku's heart seized. He didn't see his name immediately. Panic surged. The cold pressure in his chest twitched, ready to flare. Izuku forced it down. Breathe. In. 2, 3. Out. 2, 3. A nurse handed him a clipboard. "Your result will be mailed." Mailed. So he had to wait. That was worse than anything. Uraraka appeared suddenly at the edge of the bench, cheeks dusty, eyes wide. "Midoriya." Izuku's chest loosened a fraction. "Uraraka, are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said quickly. Then her face crumpled with emotion. You saved me. That slab, if you didn't." Izuku swallowed. "I just moved." "No," she insisted, fierce and shaky. "You saved me." Izuku didn't know what to say to that. Because he hadn't gotten points for it. But it still felt like the most important thing he'd done all day. Uraraka hesitated, then bowed quickly. "Thank you. Really." Then she scampered off, probably being called by staff. Izuku sat there, exhausted, staring at his hands. He could still feel it, infinity, like a phantom sensation. Like the world could be kept away if he wanted. The thought wasn't comforting. It was lonely. He fumbled his notebook out of his bag, needing something familiar. The pages were dusty, edges bent. When he opened it, a folded paper slipped out and landed on his lap. Izuku froze. His pulse jumped. Same plain paper. Same sharp handwriting. He unfolded it with shaking fingers. "Good instinct. Bad method. You used fear to hold the world back. Next time, use purpose, and learn to pull, not just stop." Izuku's breath caught. "Pull," he whispered. He looked up instinctively, scanning the room, the windows, the observation platforms. No one stood out. No dark glasses. No plain coat. Just UA staff and exhausted students and the normal noise of a normal world. But Izuku felt it anyway. That he wasn't alone in this. That someone, somewhere, knew exactly what lived inside his chest. And they were watching the distance between Izuku and disaster shrink, one chapter at a time. The letter arrived 3 days after the exam. Uku recognized the envelope before he even touched it. Thick paper, clean print, the kind of official look that made your stomach do gymnastics. UA. High school. Hero course. His mom hovered behind him like a protective spirit. Hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "Open it, open it, open it," Inko whispered, like saying it enough times would keep reality from being cruel. Izuku slid a finger under the seal. The flap lifted. The paper inside unfolded with a soft shhhk like a blade leaving its sheath. "Midoriya Izuku. Congratulations. You have been accepted into UA. High school's hero course." Izuku didn't breathe. His brain tried to reject the words like they were a prank. Then Inko screamed. Not a cute squeal. A full, messy, tearful scream that turned into sobbing laughter as he grabbed him so hard he almost fell over. "Izuku. Izuku, you did it." Izuku hugged back, and this time he didn't even feel his distance twitch. Maybe because for once, his body wasn't afraid of the world. For once, the world had said yes. He let himself smile into his mom's shoulder. He let himself believe. Then the second page fell out of the envelope. Izuku caught it before it hit the floor. It was shorter, drier, not congratulatory. Special conditions attached. His smile died instantly. Inko pulled back, wiping her eyes. What is it? Izuku's throat went tight as he read. Midoriya is. Uku will attend mandatory weekly evaluation with a designated faculty member. Midoriya Izuku will receive supplemental safety training under supervision. Midoriya Izuku will be placed under Ph. Enemenen classification review pending further investigation. Inko's face slowly paled. Izuku stared at the words until they blurred. So he got in. But the door came with chains. His chest pressure stirred faintly. Like it found the situation funny. Izuku clenched his jaw. Mom, he said softly. It's okay. Inko's voice trembled. They're treating you like a danger. Izuku swallowed. Because they weren't wrong. He folded the papers carefully and tucked them back into the envelope like he could keep the worry contained. But that night, after his mom finally slept, Izuku sat alone in his room, staring at the ceiling. He'd made it. And yet, he reached under his pillow. Pulled out the mysterious note from the hospital. Then the second note from the park. Then the third note from the exam. 3 messages from a ghost. 3 warnings that felt less like advice and more like training from a distance. Izuku laid them on the floor in front of him like evidence. Don't call it a quirk. Stop thinking of it as a wall. It's distance. Learn to pull, not just stop. Izuku's fingers trembled as he picked up his pen and wrote the question that had been eating him alive. Who are you? He didn't know who he was writing it to. He wrote it anyway. Then he folded the paper neatly, placed it inside his notebook, and closed it like he was mailing it into the universe. He stared at the notebook for a long moment. And whispered, if you're watching, answer. The air didn't change. No cold breeze. No ripple of impossible distance. Just quiet. Izuku exhaled, bitter at himself. Of course. Why would the universe answer? He turned off the light and lay down. He woke up at 3:17 a.m. to a sound he'd never heard in his apartment before. A soft click. Not the door. Not the window. More like a pen cap. Izuku's eyes snapped open. His room was dark, lit only by the weak orange glow of the streetlight outside. And someone was sitting on his desk chair. Izuku didn't scream. He tried to scream, but his throat locked. Because the person was close enough that the air around them felt wrong. Like the space had been folded and pressed into the corner of his room. The figure wore a plain coat. Dark glasses. Hands resting calmly on their knees. Just like the park. Just like the observation platform. Izuku's heart slammed against his ribs so hard it hurt. The cold pressure in his chest surged. Instinctively trying to flare infinity. And the figure raised one hand, palm out, not threatening. Don't, they said quietly. Izuku froze. Because the voice was the same. Calm. Too calm. Like a surgeon. Who are you? Izuku croaked. His voice came out small and cracked. The figure tilted their head slightly. You can call me Kuros. Izuku blinked rapidly. That's not. It's a name that works, Kuros replied. Real names create problems. You have enough problems. Izuku's fingers clenched into the blanket. How did you get in here? Kuros's head turned toward Izuku's bedroom door. Locks are for people who fear burglars. Then they looked back at him. You're not afraid of burglars. Izuku's stomach dropped. He was right. Izuku was afraid of other things. Kuros continued, like answering his thoughts was normal. Your ability is noisy. Not to ears. To the kind of things that listen. Izuku swallowed hard. The thing from the overpass. Kuros nodded once. A curse. Izuku's NTA, what? Kuros leaned forward a fraction. Before I teach you anything, I need you to accept one truth. Izuku's breath trembled. Okay. Kuros's voice stayed calm, but the words hit like a hammer. Hero society is built to fight villains. But the world produces monsters that aren't villains. Not people. Not quirks. Kuros lifted a finger and tapped their own chest. Negativity. Another tap. Fear. Another. Regret. Another. Hatred. Izuku's skin prickled. Kuros spoke like someone describing gravity. Those emotions don't disappear. They accumulate. They congeal. And when they are enough, they become something that wears the shape of a nightmare. Izuku's mouth went dry. Curses. Kuros nodded. Curses. Izuku's brain tried to reject it. But, heroes have been around for, quote, long enough to convince themselves they've catalogued every threat, Kuros finished. They haven't. Kuros's glasses angled slightly, catching the streetlight. Izuku couldn't see their eyes. Your ability, Kuros continued, is not a quirk. It's a cursed technique. Limitless. Izuku's lungs forgot how to work. Limitless, he repeated, barely audible. The word made something inside his chest hum in recognition. Like his bones remembered it. Izuku's voice shook. So, I'm, what? Like a villain. Kuros's head tilted, almost curious. Do you want to hurt people? No. Do you enjoy fear? No. Do you feel thrilled when someone suffers? Izuku swallowed. No. Then you're not a villain, Kuros said simply. You're a kid holding a chainsaw by the blade. Izuku flinched. Kuros didn't soften. And you're about to walk into UA with that chainsaw spinning. Izuku's throat tightened. I can control it. I've been practicing. Kuros's voice was flat. You've been panicking with technique. Izuku's cheeks burned. I'm trying. I know, Kuros said, and for the first time there was a hint of something human in their voice. Not warmth. More like, tired empathy. Trying is what gets people killed. Izuku stared at them, breathing fast. Kuros stood up, and Izuku's room seemed to shrink. Not physically, but in the way a predator changes the air when it stands. Kuros walked to his desk and picked up Izuku's hero notebook. Flipped through it without permission. Izuku tensed. Hey. Kuros stopped at the page where Izuku had written, WHO or U. Kuros set the notebook down gently. I'm someone who's cleaned up after heroes, Kuros said. Izuku blinked. What? Kuros looked toward the window, voice distant. Heroes fight villains in daylight. Cameras. Applause. Awards. A pause. I fight what's left behind. The grief that rots into something with teeth. Izuku's stomach turned. Kuros looked back at him. I don't hate heroes because they save people. Izuku swallowed. Then why? Because they pretend saving people ends the story, Kuros said quietly. The silence that followed was heavy. Izuku couldn't tell if it was anger or sorrow in Kuros's tone. Maybe both. Kuros turned back to him. If you want to be a hero, fine. I'm not here to stop you. Izuku's voice cracked. Then, why are you here? Kuros's answer was immediate. Because limitless is rare. And loud. And curses will come for you. Izuku's blood went cold. Kuros stepped closer to his bed, close enough that Izuku felt his distance twitch, uncertain whether to defend. Kuros didn't push. They simply held out two fingers. Show me your infinity. Izuku's throat tightened. Right now. Kuros nodded. Izuku swallowed hard and triggered it. The cold pressure in his chest rose. The air thickened. The invisible gap formed. Kuros reached forward, and their fingers stopped inches from Izuku's forehead. The gap held. Kuros didn't struggle, didn't push. They studied the space like a scientist examining glass. Sloppy. Kuros said. Izuku's face heated. It works. It works like a panic response, Kuros replied. That's not control. That's a reflex. Kuros withdrew their hand. Turn it off. Izuku forced it down with breathing. The gap faded. Kuros nodded once. Better. Then they did something that made Izuku's skin crawl. They flicked their wrist. A small object, like a bead, or a pebble, dropped from their sleeve and rolled onto Izuku's floor. It looked ordinary. But the moment it touched the ground, the room's temperature dipped. Izuku's stomach lurched. The cold pressure in his chest surged without permission. His eyes widened. What is that? A minor curse, Kuros said calmly. A leech. Harmless to adults. Dangerous to children. It feeds on fear. The pebble twitched. A thin shadow seeped out of it like ink in water. A mouth appeared. Not on a head. On the shadow itself. It opened, silently, and Izuku felt his heart try to leap out of his throat. Infinity flared automatically. The air froze. The leech curse lunged, and slammed into nothing. It skittered, furious, scraping at the invisible gap around Izuku's bed like a rat trapped behind glass. Izuku's breathing went fast. Kuros's voice cut through it. Look at it. Izuku swallowed. Forced himself to focus. The curse was small. But it was vile. A smear of shadow with too many teeth and a hunger that didn't feel like hunger, it felt like emotional vandalism. Izuku's chest pressure throbbed, loud and restless. Kuros spoke steadily. This is why I'm here. Your ability attracts these things like blood attracts sharks. Izuku's voice shook. How do I get rid of it? Kuros's answer was immediate. You don't. Not yet. Izuku's eyes widened. What? You don't have the technique for it, Kuros said. You have defense. You have space. You don't have output. Izuku's hands trembled. Then what do I do? Kuros's tone sharpened. Control. Izuku froze. Kuros pointed at the curse. Right now, your infinity is a wall. You shove everything away because you're terrified. The curse slammed again at the invisible gap, teeth gnashing at air. Kuros continued. But that isn't what infinity is. They turned back to Izuku. It's not a wall, Kuros said. It's distance. The same phrase. The same truth. Izuku's breath shuddered. Kuros lifted a hand and held two fingers apart, showing a small space. Right now, you're making the distance infinite between you and everything approaching. Izuku nodded slowly. Kuros's fingers moved closer together. But you need to learn the opposite. Izuku frowned. Opposite. Kuros's voice was quiet. You need to decide what gets close. Izuku's heart thudded. Kuros pointed at Izuku's door. Can you let your mother in right now without flinching? Izuku's throat tightened. Yes. Can you let a falling rock touch you? Izuku hesitated. I think so. Kuros's voice turned sharp. Can you let an ally grab you during a rescue? Izuku swallowed hard. He remembered Aizawa's hand stopping short. He remembered the terrifying loneliness of not being reachable. I want to, Izuku whispered. Kuros nodded once. Wanting is step 0. The curse suddenly changed tactics. It stopped slamming at infinity. And slid sideways, creeping toward the edge of Izuku's bed, toward where the gap might be weaker. Izuku's fear spiked. Infinity flared wider. And for a fraction of a second, the gap expanded toward the room itself. The air near the desk shivered. A pencil lifted off the surface and slid away as if repelled. Izuku's eyes widened in horror. Stop. Kuros's voice snapped like a whip. Breathe. Izuku forced it. In. 2. 3. Out. 2. 3. Kuros continued, calm again. Now listen carefully. They stepped nearer to the bed, careful. Not to trigger, you're going to make a vow. Izuku blinked. A vow. A binding vow, Kuros said. A rule you impose on yourself. You trade freedom for stability. Izuku's mouth went dry. Like, limiting myself. Kuros nodded. Exactly. The curse hissed silently, teeth gnashing. Kuros's voice became precise. Right now, your infinity is unreliable because it's driven by emotion. We fix that. Izuku swallowed. How? Kuros looked him dead on through those dark glasses. You will not keep infinity on passively. Izuku flinched. But that's safer. It's lonelier, Kuros cut in. And it will ruin you. Izuku's throat tightened. He couldn't argue, because he'd felt it, the way the world became untouchable. Kuros continued. Instead, you will activate it only when you consciously label something as a threat. Izuku's eyes widened. Label. Kuros nodded. Not fear. Not vibes. Not nervousness. A decision. Izuku looked at the curse. It was definitely a threat. His chest pressure thrummed. Say it, Kuros instructed. Izuku's voice shook. I will activate infinity only when I consciously label something as a threat. The moment he said it, something inside him clicked. Not like a switch, like a contract signing. The pressure in his chest steadied, less wild, more structured. His headache eased a fraction. The air around him felt calmer. Kuros nodded once. Good. The curse lunged again. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't panic. He looked at it and made a deliberate decision. Threat. Infinity activated. Clean. Sharp. The curse slammed into the gap and recoiled, furious. Izuku's breath came out shaky. But steady. Kuros's voice softened slightly. Now we can train. Izuku swallowed. Train what? Kuros's answer was simple. Cursed energy. Izuku blinked. That pressure in my chest, that's cursed energy. Kuros confirmed. CE. It's what fuels your technique. It's what curses are made of. It's what you've been leaking every time you spiral. Izuku's cheeks burned. Kuros continued. You're analytical. Good. That helps. But CE isn't a math equation. They tapped Izuku's chest lightly, not enough to startle. It's emotion with a blade. Izuku's throat tightened. So, Being scared makes it stronger. Quote. Yes, Kuros said. And being disciplined makes it usable. Kuros glanced at the curse again. Now, one last thing for tonight. Izuku's heart jumped. What? Kuros took a slow step backward. Turn infinity off. Izuku stared at them like they were insane. But it'll. Kuros's voice was calm. Yes. The curse twitched, sensing opportunity. Izuku's hands clenched. Kuros didn't move. You're going to learn that control isn't just activation. It's restraint. Izuku's breathing went fast. Kuros raised a hand. I'll intervene before it reaches you. Izuku wanted to believe that. But he couldn't see Kuros's eyes. He couldn't read their intent. His chest pressure rose, then steadied as he remembered the vow. Label. Decide. He looked at the curse. Threat. Yes. But training. He swallowed hard. He forced himself to speak, voice trembling but clear. Not a threat. Infinity released. The air warmed slightly. The gap vanished. The curse lunged instantly, a streak of shadow and teeth. Izuku's body screamed at him to activate infinity again. To protect himself. To run. But Kuros's voice cut in. Breathe. Izuku forced it. In. 2. 3. Out. 2. 3. The curse got closer. And suddenly, the shadow froze in midair. Not because of infinity. Because Kuros had stepped forward and pressed 2 fingers into empty space. And a thin line of prez. Shore snapped tight around the curse like a leash. Izuku's eyes widened. Kuros held it effortlessly. Like they were holding a fly. Kuros turned toward Izuku. See, they said quietly. I said I'd stop it. Izuku's throat tightened. You did that without drama, Kuros finished. That's what you're going to learn. Kuros pinched their fingers together slightly. The curse shriveled, teeth collapsing into nothing. Shadow folding in on itself like paper crumpled. Then it popped, gone. The room returned to normal. Izuku sat there shaking, adrenaline flooding his veins. Kuros slipped, their hands into their pockets like they'd just thrown away a candy wrapper. You start tomorrow, Kuros said. Izuku's voice was hoarse. Tomorrow. Kuros nodded. UA thinks it can supervise you once a week. Cute. Izuku blinked. UA doesn't know about you. They can't, Kuros said simply. If Hero Society learns curses are real, they'll treat it like a villain problem. They'll punch it. They'll arrest it. They'll ignore it until it eats a city. Izuku swallowed. Kuros stepped toward the window. Midoriya Izuku, they said, pausing as if weighing something. Yes. Kuros's voice was quiet, almost human again. I don't care if you become famous. Izuku blinked. I don't care if people cheer, Kuros continued. I care if you live. And if you don't become the kind of monster the world creates when it's scared. Izuku's chest tightened. Kuros opened the window. No sound, no struggle, like the world simply allowed it. They climbed onto the ledge. Izuku's eyes widened. Wait, why are you helping me? Kuros paused. For the first time, their head angled in a way that felt, faintly amused. Because, they said, if you don't learn control, your limitless will turn you into a disaster. They looked back at him. Voice calm and merciless. And I don't like cleaning up disasters. Then they stepped out into the night. Not falling. Not jumping. Just, gone, like the distance bet. The ledge and the ground had been edited out. Izuku sat frozen, heart pounding, staring at the open window. The cold air brushed his face. And deep in his chest, the pressure stirred again, steady now, shaped by a vow. Not hungry. Not panicked. Just awake. Izuku whispered into the dark. Okay. I'll learn. UA smelled like polish, steel, and ambition. Izuku noticed it the second he stepped through the front doors, like the building itself had been scrubbed clean of doubt. The hallways were bright. The ceilings were high. And every poster on the wall screamed the same message in different fonts. Be a hero. Be safe. Be legendary. He clutched his bag straps, trying not to look like he might pass out from excitement. Behind him, his mom waved like she was sending him off to war. Izuku waved back, then immediately collided with a shoulder. Watch it, nerd. Bakugo Katsuki didn't even slow down. Izuku flinched on reflex, and felt his chest tighten, the cold pressure stirring like it had been asleep and just heard its name. He forced it down. Label. Decide. Bakugo wasn't a threat. Bakugo was, Bakugo. Izuku swallowed, nodded stiffly, and kept walking. His heart was pounding for two reasons now. One was because he'd made it to UA. The other was because something in him had started measuring distance the way other people measured breath. Class 1A was exactly as chaotic as his notebook fantasies had promised. A boy with engines in his calves stood at attention like a soldier. A girl with earphone jacks smiled brightly. A guy with tape dispensers in his elbows waved. Someone was literally sparkling. Izuku took a step in and nearly tripped over his own hope. Then, Uraraka Ochako turned in her seat and saw him. Her face lit up like sunlight through a window. Midoriya. Izuku's chest loosened. You Uraraka. Hi. She leaned forward, excited. You're in my class. That's so awesome. Are you feeling okay? After the exam you looked like you were gonna die. Izuku offered weakly. Uraraka winced. I was gonna say, faint, but yeah. Izuku laughed awkwardly, and the sound felt normal. Ulking hazard. A shadow fell across the doorway. The room quieted in the way prey quieted when it sensed a predator. Aizawa Shota walked in with a sleeping bag slung over one shoulder and the expression of a man who had never forgiven the universe for inventing mornings. He didn't greet them. He didn't introduce himself with flair. He just stared at the class like he was deciding which of them would be the first paperwork headache. I'm your homeroom teacher, he said. Aizawa. No cheers. No applause. Just tension. Aizawa's eyes moved across the room and landed on Izuku. Not dramatically. Not accusingly. Just aware. Then Aizawa dropped a gym uniform bag on the desk. Change, he said. We're doing a quirk apprehension test. The class erupted. On the first day, someone yelled, a test. Another panicked. Aizawa's voice didn't change. If you want to be heroes, you don't get warm-ups. Izuku's stomach dropped. A test. Today. He hadn't even finished memorizing everyone's faces and now he had to demonstrate the thing inside his chest that wasn't a quirk and couldn't be ASED and could make him untouchable if he got scared. Aizawa yawned. Midoriya. Izuku jolted. Why yes, sir. Aizawa's eyes narrowed slightly. You'll be participating. It wasn't a question. Izuku nodded so fast his neck hurt. Yes, sir. Aizawa's gaze held for one extra beat, like he was silently adding. Don't make me regret it. The training field behind UA looked like a clean, legal version of the entrance exam arena, open space. Track lines, equipment, and the faint, constant hum of cameras watching from poles. Students lined up, stretching, showing off. Bakugo made little explosions in his palms like he was bored. Todoroki stood still, unreadable. Iida did calf stretches like his life depended on form. Izuku stood at the back, trying to keep his breathing slow. Aizawa tossed a ball in the air lazily. This test is simple. We measure your quirk usage in practical metrics. He glanced at Izuku again. Or whatever you are, he added, like he hadn't meant to say it out loud. A few students turned to look at Izuku. Izuku's face heated. Uraraka leaned closer, whispering, what does he mean? Izuku swallowed. It's complicated. Bakugo's eyes flicked over, sharp. Huh. Izuku pretended he didn't hear. Aizawa pointed at the first event. 50-meter dash. Go. The class exploded into motion, literally, in some cases. Kids launched forward with bursts of wind, engines, or pure athleticism. Izuku ran when it was his turn, legs burning, but he knew he wasn't competing there. He was competing in survival. Then came the ball throw. Aizawa held up the same orange ball from the entrance exam, innocent, round. The kind of thing that shouldn't decide your entire future. Throw it, Aizawa said. Use your quirk. Max distance. Kids went one by one, blasts, taped slingshots, telekinetic assists. Then Aizawa's eyes landed on Izuku again. Midoriya. Izuku stepped forward, ball in hand. It felt stupidly normal. That was the problem. Normal objects were where his distance betrayed him the most. Aizawa's voice was flat. Demonstrate controlled use. Izuku swallowed. Controlled. Not. Panic so hard reality bends. He stared at the field. The open air. The horizon line. He thought about what Kuros had said. Stop thinking of it as a wall. So he didn't picture a barrier. He pictured a number. A measurement. A tape measure snapping out into space. He breathed. In. 2. 3. Out. 2. 3. He held the ball. Arm cocked back. And he labeled something deliberately. Threat. No. Tool. Yes. He allowed the ball to exist normally in his hand. Then he threw. The ball flew. It didn't stop. It didn't hover. It didn't get repelled by some invisible gap. It sailed out in a clean arc and hit the grass with a dull thud, rolling to a stop. Aizawa's eyes narrowed slightly, like he'd expected something more dramatic. Bakugo scoffed. That's it. Izuku's heart sank. That was just a normal throw. Not even a good one. The ball's distance display flashed. 44.2 meters. Mediocre. Izuku's cheeks burned. Aizawa didn't comment. He just wrote something on his clipboard. Then he said, casually lethal, now demonstrate defense. Izuku's throat tightened. Defense. Iida echoed, confused. Aizawa tossed the ball back to Izuku. I'm throwing it at your face. Don't move. Stop it. The class went silent. Izuku stared at Aizawa like he'd just suggested murder. Sir. Stop it, Aizawa repeated. If you can't, you won't be able to protect civilians. Izuku's heart hammered. He could feel the cold pressure stirring, eager. He hated that it felt eager. Aizawa's eyes flashed red, erasure ready, even though it wouldn't work. Ready? Aizawa asked. Izuku swallowed and nodded. Yes. Aizawa threw. Fast. Hard. Straight at Izuku's face. Izuku didn't flinch. He labeled it. Threat. Infinity activated. The air in front of his nose thickened into impossibility. The ball slowed. Stopped. Hovered inches from his face, vibrating in place like it was trapped in a rule. A collective gasp moved through the class. Uraraka's mouth fell open. Whoa. Iida sputtered. That isn't. Bakugo's expression sharpened into something ugly and fascinated. Aizawa stepped closer, eyes tired but focused. He reached out and pressed his fingers against the ball. It wouldn't move forward. He pushed. The ball slid sideways, unable to close the last inch. Aizawa's gaze flicked to Izuku's eyes. How long can you hold it? Izuku's head had already started to ache. He forced a calm breath. I don't know. Aizawa stared for a beat, then said, release. Izuku exhaled and let the distance dissolve. The ball dropped into Aizawa's palm. The air warmed again. Izuku swayed slightly, subtle, but Aizawa caught it. Headache, Aizawa noted. Izuku nodded. Aizawa looked at the class. This is why control matters. Impressive doesn't mean safe. Then he looked back at Izuku. And quietly, so only he could hear, Aizawa said, you're still leaking. Izuku's stomach twisted. Leaking. Aizawa's eyes flicked to the corners of the field, then back. Your ability changes the environment. The air. The temperature. People feel it. Izuku swallowed hard. Because if Aizawa could feel it, then other things could too. Aizawa turned away, voice louder again. Next event. Izuku stepped back into the line, pulse pounding. Uraraka whispered, Midoriya, that was amazing. Izuku forced a smile. It's scary. Uraraka's eyes softened. But you're here. That means you're strong. Izuku wanted to believe her. But strength wasn't the problem. Control was. And tonight, Kuros was going to make that painfully clear. Kuros didn't knock. They never knocked. Izuku had barely finished dinner before the temperature in his room dipped and his desk chair creaked like it was accepting a guest. Izuku turned, heart jumping, and there they were. Plain coat. Dark glasses. Calm posture like they owned the concept of trespassing. You survived your first day, Kuros said. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck. Barely. Kuros tilted their head. How did the hero teacher react? Izuku hesitated. Aizawa, he tested me. He said I'm leaking. Kuros nodded once, like that confirmed a theory. Good. He's perceptive. Izuku stared. Good. Perceptive teachers keep you alive longer, Kuros replied. Even when they don't understand what they're looking at. Kuros stepped closer and held out a small pouch, cloth, tied with string. Izuku didn't take it. What is that? Quote. Fear, Kuros said simply. Izuku's blood went cold. What? Kuros loosened the string and tipped the pouch. A single object rolled out onto Izuku's desk. A marble. Glossy black. Like polished stone. The moment, Izuku felt it, the same sickening crawl, the same pressure in his chest waking up like a predator scenting meat. The lights dimmed slightly, not physically, more like the room's mood dropped. Izuku swallowed. Curse. Kuros nodded. Stronger than last time. The marble cracked. A thin seam opened like a mouth, and something seeped out, not shadow this time, but a warped little shape like a child's scribble brought to life. Limbs too long, joints wrong, face smeared with too many eyes. It grinned without lips. Izuku's pulse spiked. His reflex screamed. Infinity flared. Then his vow caught him like a leash. Label. Decide. He looked at it. Threat. Infinity activated cleanly. The curse lunged and hit nothing, skittering back with a silent snarl. Kuros watched, unimpressed. Better. Quote. Izuku's voice shook. Why bring stronger ones? Kuros's answer was cold. Because something stronger will find you. Soon. Izuku's stomach twisted. What do you mean, soon? Kuros didn't answer directly. They stepped to the side and pointed at the curse as it paced along the invisible boundary around Izuku. You can stop it, Kuros said. Congratulations. Izuku's hands clenched. That's good, right? It's half, Kuros replied. Stopping isn't winning, it's delaying. Izuku's throat tightened. Then what do I do? Kuros raised two fingers again, holding them apart like they were holding space itself. Pull, they said. Izuku stared. I can't. You can, Kuros corrected. You just haven't learned the shape of it. Kuros tapped their chest lightly. Cursed energy isn't only defense. It can be output. It can be direction. Izuku's head throbbed already from infinity use. Kuros's voice stayed steady. Limitless isn't just infinite distance. That's infinity. They pointed at Izuku's desk. Limitless is the technique that manipulates space. That includes making distance collapse. Izuku swallowed. Collapse. Kuros nodded. Lapse. They said the word like it was a definition. Lapse. Blue. Izuku's chest pressure hummed as if that phrase belonged to him. Blue. Pull. Space listening. Izuku's breathing sped up. How do I do it? Kuros's voice became clinical. Infinity is a rule. You never reach me. Izuku nodded. Blue is a command. Space, come here. Izuku blinked. That sounds simple. Kuros cut in. It isn't. Because you don't have 6 eyes. Izuku froze. 6. Kuros waved a hand. Efficiency. Precision. A natural advantage some rare users have. You don't. Izuku's stomach dropped. So I can't. You can, Kuros repeated. But you will pay more. Energy. Focus. Pain. Izuku swallowed hard. Kuros stepped back. Turn infinity off. Izuku stared at the pacing curse. No, Izuku said immediately. Kuros's voice was flat. Then you'll never learn blue. Izuku's hands shook. It'll attack me. Kuros nodded. Yes. Izuku's mouth went dry. Kuros continued, calm as a knife. If you want to pull space, why? Oh, you need to stop using infinity as a crutch every time you feel fear. Izuku's throat tightened. He didn't want to admit it, but Kuros was right, infinity felt safe. Too safe. It was tempting to become untouchable forever. And if he did that, he wouldn't be a hero. He'd be a locked door. Izuku forced himself to breathe. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. He stared at the curse. He labeled, deliberately. Training, not a threat. Infinity released. The air warmed. The curse lunged instantly. Izuku's heart spiked. Kuros didn't intervene. Izuku's instinct screamed to reactivate infinity. But instead, he clenched his fist and tried to do what Kuros said. Space, come here. He pushed his cursed energy outward, awkward, messy, like shoving a tide with his hands. Nothing happened. The curse was enough that Izuku could smell it, stale sweat and old resentment. It snapped its teeth at his face. Izuku flinched, and then his fear labeled it automatically. Threat. Infinity tried to flare. Izuku forced it down mid-surge. Jaw clenched so hard it hurt. No, he hissed at himself. Blue. His chest burned. His vision blurred at the edges. He focused on a point behind the curse, like he was trying to grab the air itself and yank it forward. Kuros's voice cut in. Don't pull the target. Izuku gasped. What? Pull the space, Kuros said sharply. You're not telekinetic. You're collapsing distance. Izuku's head felt like it was splitting. The curse lunged again, and Izuku finally felt it. A tiny shift, like the air in front of his palm dented. Not visible, not flashy, but real. The curse's body jerked forward suddenly, as if something had yanked it by the spine. It slammed into the desk edge with a sick little thud. Izuku's eyes widened. I did that. Kuros nodded once, Again. Izuku tried. He reached with his will. Not his hand. The air dented again. The curse dragged forward across the desk, claws scraping wood, face twisting in furious confusion as the world pulled it without touching it. Izuku's chest burned hotter. His nose suddenly felt warm. He blinked. Blood dripped onto his lip. Izuku panicked. I'm bleeding. Kuros's voice stayed calm. Stop. Izuku released whatever he was doing instantly. The pressure in his chest collapsed. The curse skittered back, hissing. Izuku wiped his nose, fingers trembling. That hurt. Kuros nodded. Yes. Izuku stared at them. That's normal. For you, Kuros said. Because you don't have the efficiency. Blue requires precision. Precision costs you more. Izuku swallowed hard. So I can't use it in fights. You can, Kuros corrected. But only in bursts. Small pulls. Controlled. 2, maybe 3, before you risk blacking out. Izuku's throat tightened. Kuros leaned closer. You wanted a power that could change your fate. Izuku's eyes stung. Kuros's voice was quiet, almost human again. This is the price. Izuku nodded shakily. He looked at the curse again, still alive, still snarling, still not exorcised. Can I finish it? Izuku asked. Kuros's head tilted. Not yet. You don't have output. Izuku clenched his fist. Then what was the point? Kuros answered immediately. To prove you can make space listen. They stepped forward and snapped 2 fingers. A thin pressure line formed, and the curse crumpled in on itself like paper crushed in a fist, gone. The room warmed back to normal. Izuku sat on the edge of his bed. Breathing hard, nose still bleeding slightly. He looked at his shaking hands. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt sober. Kuros picked up a tissue box and tossed it toward him. Izuku flinched out of habit. Kuros paused, still reflexing. Izuku swallowed. Sorry. Kuros's voice was flat. Don't apologize. Fix it. They moved toward the window again. Izuku wiped his nose, then blurted. Why won't you tell me your real name? Kuros stopped with one hand on the window frame. For a long moment, they said nothing. Then, quietly, Kuros said, because if you know who I am, you'll start trusting me. Izuku blinked. Isn't that good? Kuros's head turned slightly, and Izuku felt the weight of those hidden eyes through the dark glasses. No, Kuros said. Trust makes you sloppy. They opened the window. Cold air flowed in. Kuros stepped onto the ledge. One more rule, they said, voice steady. You do not use blue in public until you can do it without bleeding. Izuku swallowed. But what if I need it? Quote. Kuros's tone sharpened. Then you use infinity and you run. Izuku clenched his jaw. That's not heroic. Kuros looked back at him, calm and merciless. Dead heroes don't save anyone. Then Kuros was gone, distance edited, night swallowing them. Izuku sat the window. His chest still felt hot from the strain of blue. And yet, beneath the pain, something else was there. A strange certainty. He could pull. He could move the world. He just had to learn how to do it without letting the world move him first. The next morning at UA, Izuku arrived early. His nose had stopped bleeding. His head still ached faintly. He walked down the hallway toward Class 1A. And felt it. A thin, wrong chill crawling along the corridor, almost like a draft. No one else seemed to notice. Students laughed and shouted and complained about training. Izuku slowed, heart pounding. The chill wasn't from air conditioning. It felt familiar. Like the overpass. Like something listening. His chest pressure stirred, quiet and alert. Izuku stared at the empty corner of the hallway. And for a second, just a second, he thought he saw a smear of shadow vanish behind the vending machine. Like a grin disappearing into the wall. Izuku swallowed hard. Curses, he whispered. UA was supposed to be the safest place in Japan. But if Kuros was right, then safety was just what pay. Opal believed when they couldn't see the monsters feeding under their feet. Izuku clenched his fists. Today had been about learning to pull. Tomorrow might be about learning what was pulling back. The sports festival was supposed to be fun. That was the lie UA sold to the public with fireworks, music, and camera angles that made teenagers look like legends. But standing inside the stadium tunnel, wearing his 1A uniform and hearing 50,000 people chant like a living wave, Izuku felt the cold pressure in his chest stir. Not from fear, from the sheer density of emotion. Excitement, jealousy, hope, doubt, worship. It was like the whole stadium was a battery. And if Kuros was right, then this place wasn't just a stage. It was a feast. Izuku swallowed, fingers flexing. He had to stay calm. He had to stay controlled. Because if his cursed energy started leaking here, it wouldn't just be weird. It would be a beacon. Uraraka bounced on her heels beside him, nervous smile stretched wide. This is insane, she whispered. There are so many people. Iida stood straight, adjusting his glasses like he could discipline the air itself. Remember, we are representing UA. We must behave with dignity. Bakugo behind them looked like he wanted to punch the concept of dignity. Todoroki was silent, eyes half-lidded, like he was already in the finals in his head. Izuku tried to focus on breathing. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. But the moment they stepped out onto the field, the crowd roared. The sound hit Izuku like a physical force. His chest tightened. The cold pressure rose. He caught it immediately. Label. Decide. The crowd wasn't a threat. The crowd was loud. He forced the distance back down and smiled awkwardly when cameras swung toward him. Present Mike's voice exploded through the speakers. Introducing Class 1A with ridiculous hype. Kids waved. Some did quirk tricks for the audience. Izuku waved too, trying not to look like he was calculating how many negative motions per square meter could create a curse big enough to swallow a stadium. Stop, 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 you'll spiral. He bit the inside of his cheek, grounding himself. Then Aizawa appeared on the sidelines for a moment, eyes scanning the students like a tired hawk. His gaze flicked to Izuku. A subtle nod, not approval, a warning, don't make me regret it. Izuku nodded back. Event 1, the obstacle race. His starting line was crowded with students from every class. Quirks crackled and glowed and hummed. Izuku stood between Uraraka and a boy with a tail, shoulders tense. Present Mike counted down. 3, 2, 1, go. Everyone surged forward at once. The first obstacle wasn't even an obstacle. It was people. A stampede of ambition. Izuku ducked, dodged, and used the one advantage he did have. He watched. He didn't charge blindly. He moved like someone reading a battlefield. A giant robot dropped into the course, one of the old entrance exam units repurposed, stomping and swinging like a moving wall. Students screamed and scattered. Some attacked it for show. Izuku didn't. He labeled it fast. Threat. Infinity flicked on, not a huge flare, just a clean, controlled layer. Enough that if debris flew or a metal limb swung too close, it would stop short. He sprinted past broken pavement as the robot slammed down and sent chunks of concrete skidding through the air. A chunk flew toward his head, stopped, hovered, then dropped harmlessly as Izuku ran out of its path. Not flashy, not dramatic, just safe. He heard gasps from nearby students who noticed the impossible near miss. Izuku ignored them. Fame was a distraction. Distraction meant mistakes. Ahead, Todoroki created a wide wave of ice that locked half the field in place. Students slipped and crashed into each other. Bakugo blasted overhead like a missile, laughing like the course was beneath him. Izuku reached the ice wall and stopped, brain racing. He could walk around, but that would waste time. He could climb, but it was slick. He could. A faint tug in his chest. Blue. No. Kuros said not in public. Not until no bleeding. But the stadium was too loud. Too much pressure. Too many eyes. If he got trapped here, he'd lose. And if he lost early, he'd have fewer chances to learn, fewer chances to prepare for what Kuros warned was coming. Izuku clenched his jaw. Controlled. Tiny. One burst. He raised his hand slightly, palm angled toward the edge of the ice sheet. Not at people, never at people. He didn't pull the target. He pulled the space. The air dented. The ice near the edge cracked and shifted, not shattered, not express. Loaded, just dragged sideways enough to expose a narrow gap by a concrete barrier. It looked like the ice had simply broken naturally. Nobody screamed. Nobody pointed. But Izuku's vision swam for a second. His nose warmed. He wiped it quickly. Blood. Just a little. He swallowed hard and forced his breathing steady. In. 2. 3. Out. 2. 3. He slipped through the gap and sprinted onward, keeping his face neutral like nothing happened. Uraraka spotted him later, eyes wide. How did you get through that? Izuku wheezed. I got lucky. He hated lying, but he hated being a target more. The minefield came next, fake explosives hidden in sand. Most students brute forced it. Izuku didn't. He watched the ground. He tracked patterns. He followed the lightest-footed kids and used their steps as a map. A blast went off near him, shockwave and dirt. His reflex tried to flare infinity. He caught it mid-surge. Not a threat unless it's coming at me. He didn't want to be the kid who walked through life untouchable. Even when he didn't need to. He wanted control, not isolation. Toward the end, the course narrowed into a choke point, students fighting and shoving, desperate to get ahead. Bakugo dropped in front of Izuku. Landing hard, explosions popping in his palms like angry applause. He glanced back at Izuku, eyes sharp, suspicious. The hell was that back there? Bakugo snarled. You mauve. Ed threw Todoroki's ice like it was nothing. Izuku's throat tightened. I didn't. Bakugo stepped closer. Too close. Izuku's chest pressure twitched. Not fear. Instinct. Threat. No. But Bakugo felt like danger because he was danger. Even when he wasn't trying to kill you. Izuku forced the instinct down, jaw clenched. Bakugo's gaze narrowed further as if he could smell the effort. You're hiding something. Izuku swallowed. So are you, he blurted before he could stop himself. Bakugo's eyes widened a fraction, then his face twisted into a grin that was all teeth and violence. Say that again, nerd. Izuku's heart hammered. He didn't have time for this. He leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on the course ahead, voice shaking but stubborn. Move. For a second, Bakugo looked like he might actually hit him. Then Todoroki passed them both with a calm stride, ice trailing behind him that they were wasting time. Bakugo clicked his tongue and blasted forward. Izuku exhaled shakily and ran. He finished the obstacle race in the top group, not first, but close enough that the crowd still roared his name like they'd discovered a new weird favorite. Midoriya, Midoriya, Midoriya. Izuku led awkwardly and tried not to think about how chanting felt like feeding. Event 2, Cavalry Battle. This event was worse, not physically, socially. Teams formed fast, strong kids clustering together like magnets. Izuku stood alone for a second too long. He felt it like a weight. Quirkless vibes. Even though he wasn't quirkless anymore, he still carried the shape of that loneliness. Then Uraraka and Iida rushed over. We're teaming with you, Uraraka said immediately. Iida nodded. Midoriya, your strategic mind is invaluable. Izuku blinked. Really? Really? Uraraka said, smiling. Also, you saved me. So, yeah. His chest loosened. Then Tokiyami joined, dark bird head, calm eyes, with dark shadow rippling behind him like living ink. Dark shadow made Izuku's skin prickle. Not because it was evil. Because it felt close to something cursed adjacent. Like a shadow that had opinions. Tokiyami looked at Izuku quietly. Your power unsettles Dark Shadow. Dark Shadow hissed low, like it didn't trust the air around Izuku. Izuku swallowed. Sorry. Tokiyami shook his head. Not sorry. Interesting. That word, interesting, felt dangerous. But they formed a team. Tokiyami as power, Iida as speed, Uraraka as weight control. Izuku as the weird variable. They placed Izuku on top with the headband points because, as Iida said, you are the target. We are the shield. Izuku almost laughed, because if only they knew. Izuku was the shield. The match began. Chaos exploded across the field, teams colliding, falling, stealing headbands, quirks firing in every direction like a festival of violence. Izuku kept his breathing steady and his infinity off. He couldn't be untouchable here. His team needed to hold him physically. One mistake and they'd lose grip. So he made a rule inside the rule. Infinity only in micro bursts. Only when something is about to hit my head. Only for a blink. Team after team rushed them. Izuku called strategies fast, voice loud over the noise. Tokiyami, left flank. Iida, pivot. Uraraka, lighten us. A student tried to grab his headband. Izuku labeled, threat. Infinity flickered for half a second. The hand stopped just short, fingers clawing at nothing. Tokiyami's dark shadow smashed them away. Izuku released instantly, letting his friends keep their grip on him. It worked. It felt clean. It felt like real control. Then Bakugo's team approached. Of course, Bakugo had built a monster squad around himself, Kirishima as defense, Shiro as capture, and someone else for mobility. Bakugo looked up at Izuku with the expression of a man about to prove a point. Midoriya. Bakugo shouted, voice carrying, stop doing that creepy invisible thing and fight. Izuku's stomach tightened. Bakugo launched upward with an explosion, rocketing toward Izuku's headband like a missile. Izuku's team reacted, but Bakugo was too fast. Izuku's chest pressure surged. He labeled, threat. Infinity flickered. Bakugo's hand stopped inches from the headband, fingers trembling against nothing. For a split second, Bakugo's eyes widened, not fear, but shock. Then anger. Pure, humiliating anger. He detonated an explosion point blank at the gap. The blast didn't hit Izuku, but it rattled Izuku's focus. Infinity wavered. Heat and sound slammed his senses. And for the first time since the vow, Izuku felt the temptation. Just keep Infinity on. Just lock him out forever. He hated the thought. He released Infinity on purpose. Bakugo's momentum carried him forward. Tokiyami's dark shadow slammed him sideways midair, and Iida dashed, repositioning the team. They survived. Barely. Bakugo landed, snarling, glaring at Izuku like Izuku had personally insulted his bloodline. You're not a hero, Bakugo hissed, low enough only Izuku could hear as they passed. You're a cheat. Izuku's throat tightened. He wanted to scream back. Instead, he whispered, just for himself. Then I'll cheat, to save people. The cavalry battle ended with Izuku's team in a qualifying position. Izuku jumped down, legs shaking from tension more than exertion. And as he stood there, he noticed something. The air near the stadium wall, high up, shadowed, away from cameras, felt wrong. A thin chill. A faint, crawling pressure. Nobody else reacted. Izuku's chest tightened. A curse. Here. At UA. His gaze flicked toward the dark corner. Nothing visible. But he felt, watched, measured, like something in the shadows had noticed the way space bent around him. Event 3, one-on-one tournament. This was the part the public loved. It was the part villains watched. It was the part where kids became brands. Izuku stood in the waiting hallway, staring at the bracket. His name sat there like a trap. Midoriya Izuku vs. Shinso Hitoshi. Izuku blinked. He'd heard about Shinso, brainwashing quirk, general studies. People whispered he should have been in hero course. Izuku swallowed. Mind-affecting quirks were dangerous. But also, if Shinso brainwashed him, would Infinity activate? Would Limitless respond? Or would it just sit there while Izuku's body walked into danger? He felt his chest pressure stir, uncertain. Uraraka squeezed his arm. You got this. Izuku nodded, but his mind was racing. When it was time, he stepped into the arena. The crowd roared. Shinso stood across from him, hands in his pockets, expression bored in a way that looked like armor. Midoriya, Shinso called, voice amplified. You're the guy everyone's talking about. Izuku's stomach tightened. Hi. Shinso's eyes narrowed slightly. Do you enjoy being special? Izuku froze. That question hit a nerve. The crowd quieted, sensing drama. Izuku swallowed. No. Quote. Shinso smiled faintly. Really? Because it looks like you found a power nobody can stop. Izuku's chest pressure rose. He caught it. Don't react. Don't answer impulsively. Shinso's voice softened. Almost friendly. Must be nice. People cheer for you. Teachers watch you. Everyone thinks you're the next big thing. Izuku's hands trembled. Shinso took one step forward. Tell me, Midoriya, do you think you deserve it? Izuku's throat tightened. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to say no. He wanted to explain everything, curses, kuros, vows, blood, fear. The crowd leaned in, and Shinso's quirk waited behind his words like a hook. Izuku bit his tongue. He didn't answer. Shinso's eyes widened slightly, annoyed. Scared? Shinso asked. Izuku's chest pressure pulsed. He breathed. In. 2. 3. Out. 2. 3. He raised his hands, not like a fighter, but like someone ready to react. Shinso clicked his tongue. Fine. He lunged. Fast. Izuku labeled. Threat. Infinity flickered just long enough to stop Shinso's grabbing hands. Shinso stumbled, startled, as if he'd run into invisible air. The crowd gasped. Izuku stepped sideways, keeping distance without making distance infinite. Controlled. Clean. Shinso's eyes narrowed. So it's not just defense, it's like you decide the rules. Izuku didn't answer. He couldn't afford to. Shinso circled. You know. People like you or why guys like me get ignored. Izuku's chest tightened again. Guilt. Empathy. Those emotions were dangerous here. They made him soft. And softness could become a curse if twisted wrong. Izuku forced his feet steady. Shinso darted in again, trying to bait him into talking. Izuku kept silent and used small movements, infinity flickers to deny grabs, normal movement to reposition. Never letting himself become untouchable to everything. He couldn't risk losing himself in infinity. Because Kuros's warning echoed in his skull. Infinity is lonely. Eventwatted. Izuku saw it, one half step too eager. Izuku made a decision. Not blue. Not here. Not with a crowd. Just a simple move. He allowed Shinso's sleeve to touch, on purpose, then pivoted, grabbing the fabric and using Shinso's momentum to flip him. Shinso hit the ground with a grunt. Izuku stepped back instantly, hands up, breath fast. The crowd erupted. Shinso stared up at him, stunned. Then, quietly, so the microphones barely caught it, Shinso said. You're not just lucky. Izuku swallowed, heart pounding. I know, Izuku whispered back. And that's what scares me. Shinso didn't reply. The referee called it. Izuku advanced. He walked out of the arena with shaking legs and too many eyes on his back. In the hallway, Bakugo was waiting, arms crossed, expression murderous. You're next, Bakugo said. Izuku's stomach dropped. He checked the bracket. Bakugo had advanced too. Of course. Which meant, if they kept winning, finals could be Izuku versus Bakugo. Or Izuku versus Todoroki. Or worse, Izuku versus Todoroki then Bakugo. The crowd would love it. And the stadium's emotional pressure would build and build. Izuku felt his chest pressure stir as if anticipating the same. Then, from somewhere deep under the stadium noise, Izuku felt a chill crawl up his spine. Not from fear. From recognition. Like the overpass. Like the hallway corner. Like something had been waiting for a moment when the crowd's emotions peaked. Izuku's eyes flicked toward a shadowed maintenance door at the end of the corridor. For half a second, he saw it. A smear of darkness shaped like a grin. And inside that grin, too many hands. Izuku's blood went cold. Because it wasn't watching the match. It was watching him. The sports festival ended like all big moments ended in Hero Society. With fireworks, headlines, and 1,000 people deciding who you were, based on a 10-second clip. Izuku watched it happen in real time on the monitors in the athlete hallway. Midoriya, the untouchable prodigy. New monster of UA. Is this kid even using a quirk? He hated every title. Because none of them mentioned the only part that mattered. There had been something in the shadows of the stadium. And it had smiled at him. He didn't tell anyone. Not Uraraka, who was still glowing from the adrenaline of the tournament. Not Iida, who would have reported it to staff instantly. Not even Aizawa, because what did you say? Hey, sir, I think a nightmare with too many hands was watching me between matches. He could already picture Aizawa's face, exhausted disbelief sliding into dangerous concern. So Izuku did the one thing he'd been learning to do lately. He kept breathing, in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, and waited for Kuros. Kuros arrived the night after the festival. No knock, no warning, just the temperature dipping like the room remembered fear. Izuku didn't even sit up this time. He just stared at the chair. You saw it, Kuros said. Izuku's throat tightened. I saw something. Kuros tilted their head. Describe it. Izuku swallowed. A grin. In the maintenance corridor. And, hands. Too many. Kuros's voice didn't change. A curse. Not small. Izuku's stomach twisted. At UA. Yes, Kuros said. Because the sports festival is a furnace. Emotions. Rivalry. Worship. The kind of pressure that makes curses fat. Izuku clenched his blanket. Why didn't the teachers notice? Kuros's glasses caught a thin line of streetlight. Because most of them can't see it. They see injuries, villains, sabotage. They don't see what the crowd becomes when it believes violence is entertainment. Izuku's chest pressure stirred, angry, cold. That's not fair, Izuku whispered. Kuros nodded once, like fairness was a childish myth. No, it isn't. Izuku sat up slowly. So what do I do? Kuros stepped closer. Internships start soon. Izuku blinked. Yeah, you will see real violence, Kuros continued. Real fear, real regret, and you will see the thing heroes don't talk about. Izuku's throat tightened. Curses. Kuros nodded. Izuku stared at the floor. But you said I can't exorcise them yet. Kuros's voice was flat. You can't output technique yet. You can still kill a small curse the old way. Izuku looked up. Old way. Kuros reached into their coat and placed something on Izuku's desk. A plain metal object. A short baton, about the length of Izuku's forearm. Matte black. No logo. No hero branding. Izuku hesitated before touching it. Kuros said, "It's steel." Izuku frowned. Okay. Now pour your cursed energy into it, Kuros instructed. Izuku's stomach flipped. I can do that. You've been doing it by accident, Kuros replied. This is on purpose. Izuku swallowed and picked it up. The baton was cold, heavy, real. He closed his eyes and focused on the pressure in his chest. Not infinity. Not distance. Just the energy itself. Fear's leftovers. His own anxiety turned into a current. He pushed it down his arm like he was sending heat into his fingertips. At first, nothing happened. Then the baton felt wrong. Not hotter. Not colder. More like it stopped being an object and started being an extension of intent. Izuku's eyes opened wide. Kuros nodded. Good. Izuku swallowed. So if I hit a curse with this, it dies, Kuros finished. If it's weak enough. Izuku's chest tightened. Die. Kuros's voice was quiet. Don't romanticize it. Don't demonize it. It's a tumor made of human suffering. You remove it. Izuku stared at the baton like it might bite him. Then he whispered the question he'd been avoiding. What if it's attached to a person? Kuros didn't hesitate. Then you remove it anyway. Izuku flinched. Even if it hurts them. Kuros leaned forward slightly. It will hurt them more if you hesitate. Izuku's throat tightened. Because part of him understood that. And part of him hated it. Kuros's voice sharpened. This is the lesson that breaks people, Midoriya. You want to be a hero. Then accept reality. Izuku's hands trembled around the baton. I accept it. Kuros paused. Then said, almost softly. Good. Because someone is going to test that in Hosu. Izuku's blood went cold. Hosu. Kuros stepped back as if the conversation was already decided. You'll understand when you see him. Izuku stood abruptly. See who? Kuros didn't answer. They moved toward the window. Izuku's voice rose, desperation slipping in. Kuros. Kuros paused on the ledge. One more thing. Izuku's breath hitched. Yeah. Kuros's voice was calm, but the words landed like a warning sign. Your blue is getting cleaner. But you're still bleeding. Izuku swallowed. I know. You keep forcing output without efficiency. Kuros continued. That will kill you before a villain does. Izuku's eyes stung. So what do I do? Kuros's head tilted. Reverse it. Izuku blinked. Reverse. For healing, Kuros said. Not for comfort. For survival. Izuku stared. You mean, like, healing myself? Kuros nodded once. A little. Not enough to make you immortal. Enough to keep you from collapsing when you push too far. Izuku swallowed hard. Kuros stepped out into the night. And vanished like distance itself had been edited away. Izuku stood in his room holding the baton like it was a promise and a threat in one. He whispered into the empty air. What am I walking into? No answer. Only the faint hum in his chest. Awake, waiting. Internships came fast. Too fast. Teachers gave speeches about learning under pro heroes. Building careers, showing potential. Students buzzed with excitement like it was a second festival. Izuku felt none of that. He felt like he was walking toward a PLA. CE on a map that Kuros had circled in red. Hosu. Aizawa called him aside after class. No theatrics. No yelling. Just that Deku feel like he was already on thin ice. You're interning with Manual, Aizawa said. Izuku blinked. Manual. The water hero. Aizawa nodded. Rescue focused. Controlled environment. Less chance of you turning a city block into an incident. Izuku's cheeks burned. I won't. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. You might. That's why I'm choosing your internship. You need experience without chaos. Izuku swallowed. Yes, sir. Aizawa held his gaze for a long beat. And Midoriya. Yes. If something feels wrong, if you sense a threat you can't explain, tell me. Izuku's chest tightened. He wanted to. He almost did. But then he pictured explaining curses and Kuros and the baton in the way Yue couldn't even see the things feeding on its walls. So Izuku nodded and lied with his whole face. Yes, sir. Aizawa stared like he knew, but didn't call him out. Good, he said quietly. Stay alive. Hosu City smelled like traffic and rain and burnt oil. Izuku arrived at the agency nervous but determined, standing straight in his internship outfit like he could discipline his fear into obedience. Manuel greeted him with enthusiastic professionalism, smiling, firm handshake, bright, let's do our best. Manuel did not notice the cold pressure in Izuku's chest. Manuel did not ice the faint static at the edge of his vision. Izuku did. The city felt heavy. Not just busy. Heavy like a bruise. Manuel ran him through rescue drills, water control for extinguishing fires, crowd control, basic hero patrol protocol. Izuku followed everything perfectly. And still, the unease didn't leave. It clung to the streets like damp. Hours into patrol, Izuku saw it happen. Not a villain attack. Not even a quirk accident. Just a man on the sidewalk, middle-aged, tired face, eyes hollow, suddenly shoving a stranger with both hands like something snapped inside him. The stranger stumbled into the street. A car honked, swerved. Manuel rushed forward, shouting, "Hey! Calm down." Izuku moved too, instinct screaming. He reached the aggressor and grabbed his arm to restrain. And the man twisted, eyes wild, teeth bared. Not angry like a normal person. Hungry. Izuku's stomach dropped. Because he saw it. A smear of shadow clinging to the man's neck like wet tar. A tiny mouth opening where no mouth should be. A leech. Not massive like the overpass. Small. Parasite small. But enough to turn a moment of stress into violence. Manuel couldn't see it. Manuel only saw a civilian losing control. Izuku's chest pressure surged. Infinity tried to rise automatically. He caught it. This wasn't a threat to him. It was a threat to everyone else. The man's hand swung toward Manuel's face. Izuku labeled instantly. Threat. Infinity flickered for a blink, stopping the swing just short. Manuel blinked, startled. What the? Izuku didn't explain. He moved around behind the man and pinned his arms carefully, controlling contact like he'd practiced. The leech curse hissed silently, writhing against the man's skin like it didn't like being noticed. Izuku's mind raced. If he called it out, Manuel would think he was insane. If he did nothing, the curse would keep feeding. So Izuku made a choice. He loosened one hand, just enough to reach into his coat. His fingers closed around the matte black baton. He pushed CE into it. The baton woke up, again, heavy with intent. Manuel shouted, "Midoriya, don't hurt him." Izuku's voice came out strained. "I won't." He leaned closer to the man's ear, speaking fast and gentle like he'd seen heroes do with panicked civilians. "Sir," Izuku whispered, "you're not bad. Okay. Something is on you. I'm going to remove it." The man's eyes flickered, confusion battling rage. The leech curse sensed danger and tried to crawl deeper into the man's shadow. Izuku's heart hammered. If it hid, he'd miss. And if he missed, he swallowed hard and swung the baton, not at the man's skull, not at his neck. At the shadow clinging to him. The baton passed through air. And connected with something that wasn't physical. A crack like wet paper tearing. The leech curse shrieked without sound and burst into black dust that evaporated like smoke. The man went limp instantly. Like someone had turned off the violence switch. He collapsed in Izuku's arms, breathing hard, eyes wide with sudden horror. The man stammered. "What did I?" Izuku lowered him carefully to the ground, hands steady, voice soft. "You're okay," Izuku said. "You're okay. Just breathe." The man shook, tears spilling suddenly as reality hit him. Manuel stared at Izuku, stunned. "Midoriya, what did you just do?" Izuku's throat tightened. He couldn't say, curse. He couldn't explain, exorcism. So he did the only thing he could without breaking the world. "I knocked something off him," Izuku said carefully. Manuel's brow furrowed. "Something." Izuku nodded, swallowing. "It wasn't him." Manuel stared at the man, who was sobbing and apologizing into his hands like he'd woken up from a nightmare. Then Manuel looked back at Izuku, unsettled. "Okay," Manuel said slowly. "We'll write it up as stress-induced aggression. You intervened before anyone was hurt. Izuku nodded, but his chest felt tight. Because he hadn't intervened against stress. He'd intervened against something made of stress. And now he'd killed it. Removed it. Whatever word you used, there was no getting around the truth. Izuku had just destroyed a living thing he couldn't explain. And the man would never know what had been on him. Izuku looked down at his baton. His hand trembled slightly. That was the moment the question hit him, not from the crowd, not from Bakugo, not from Shinso. From inside his own chest. If I can't prove what I removed, how do I know I'm right? His stomach twisted. His head pulsed faintly. He felt the beginning of another nosebleed and swallowed it down. Not now. That night, Hosu screamed. Sirens. Shouts. Footsteps pounding wet pavement. Manuel's agency got the call like a punch to the gut. Multiple attacks. Reports of paralysis. A serial killer. Izuku's blood went cold before Manuel even said the name. Because the city's mood shifted. Fear thickened. The air tasted wrong. A curse buffet. Manuel grabbed his gear, eyes wide. Midoriya, stay close. Izuku nodded, but his chest pressure was already awake. Buzzing like a warning bell. On the street, Izuku spotted a familiar figure sprinting past, engines roaring in his calves. Iida Tenya. Izuku's eyes widened. Iida. Iida didn't stop. His face was twisted with something Izuku had never seen on him before. Rage. Raw, personal rage. Izuku's stomach dropped. No. This is Stain's arc. He ran after Iida without thinking. Midoriya. Manuel shouted behind him, but Izuku was already moving. Rain slicked the pavement. Neon lights blurred. The city felt like it was holding its breath. He turned a corner and saw them. A narrow alley. A man in a long coat, stained red, blade in hand, standing over a fallen hero. And Iida charging at him like a missile. The killer's head turned slightly. His eyes weren't normal. Not glowing. Not quirked. Just, sharp. Alive. Like a predator who loved purpose. He smiled. Ah, the man said, voice low and pleased. Another fake hero. Izuku's heart slammed. Stain. But the thing that made Izuku's blood turn to ice wasn't the blade. It wasn't the fallen hero. It wasn't even the way Stain moved like he'd already memorized how you'd die. It was what Izuku saw clinging to Stain's shadow. A darkness that wasn't his coat. A shape like a crowned mouth. A curse, fat and grinning, feeding off the hatred in the alley like it had found religion. Izuku stopped dead. Because now the question wasn't theoretical. Now it wasn't a leech on a civilian. It was a monster born from ideology. And it was smiling at White him. Stain stepped forward, blade gleaming. Iida lunged. And Izuku realized, with a sick twist in his gut. If he tried to remove what was clinging to Stain's shadow, he might have to remove Stain too. Izuku's chest pressure surged. Infinity trembled at the edge of activation. His baton felt heavy in his hand. And somewhere in the rain, the city's fear deepened. Like the world itself was asking him the same brutal question. Are you here to save people, or to decide who deserves saving? Rain turned Hosu into a smear of neon and sirens. Izuku's shoes skidded when he hit the alley mouth, and his whole body went cold for a reason that had nothing to do with weather. Stain stood in the center like the alley belonged to him. A fallen hero lay half-slumped near the wall, breathing but not moving, eyes wide with the terror of being awake inside a frozen body. Iida was already charging, engines screaming, rage driving him like a spear. And behind Stain's shadow, that grin, not a human grin, a curse bloated with ideology, coiled like a crown of hunger around the killer's presence. It wasn't attached to his skin like the leech earlier. It was attached to his meaning. Izuku's chest pressure stirred, sharp and angry, like the technique inside him recognized an enemy that wasn't villain or civilian, but something worse. A man who believed he was righteous enough to kill. Iida. Izuku shouted. Iida didn't slow. Stain's eyes flicked to Izuku, just for a heartbeat. That heartbeat felt like being measured. Ah, Stain said, voice almost pleased. Another one. Izuku stepped forward and labeled it immediately, cleanly, like Kuros drilled into his bones. Threat. Infinity snapped on. Not a flare. Not a panic wall. A controlled rule. Stain moved. Fast, knife flashing, coat whipping, feet quiet despite the speed. He wasn't moving like a man with a quirk advantage. He was moving like a man who'd practiced killing until his body forgot what hesitation was. His blade cut toward Iida's ribs. Infinity wasn't aimed at Iida. Izuku couldn't cover the whole alley with a bubble. That kind of sloppy, everything stays away, was how you isolated yourself and got someone else hurt. So Izuku did the only thing he could. He stepped into the line of attack. Stain's Nif. He hit the invisible gap inches from Izuku's shoulder and stopped like it had met a rule it didn't understand. Metal shivered against nothing. Stain's eyes widened a fraction. Then narrowed. Interesting, Stain muttered. Iida's momentum carried him forward anyway, rage blind. He swung a kick. Stain shifted, grabbed Iida's calf, and slid his blade toward Iida's ankle, fast enough Izuku barely tracked it. Izuku flicked Infinity again, tighter this time, just on the blade's path. The knife stopped. Iida's kick landed, barely, clipping Stain's shoulder. Stain rolled with it, fluid as water. And Izuku saw it, saw the curse behind Stain pulse. Delighted. Because this wasn't just violence. It was belief, and belief made fear sharper. Stain's gaze snapped to Izuku again. You interfere to protect a fake hero fueled by revenge. Izuku's throat tightened. He's not fake. Stain's grin cut deeper. Then why does his hate taste so pure? Iida flinched like he'd been slapped. Shut up. Stain's hand shot out. He wasn't aiming his knife now. He was aiming for blood. A cut. A nick. A single droplet. Because Stain's quirk didn't need a clean hit. It just needed a taste. Izuku's mind raced. If Stain gets my blood, he can paralyze me. Infinity could stop the blade from reaching him, yes. But if he got someone else's blood, if he got Iida's, if he got the fallen heroes, he didn't need to paralyze Izuku to win. He just needed Izuku to watch someone else freeze. Stain lunged for Iida again. Izuku moved on instinct. Infinity flicker, knife stops. Izuku's baton was already in his hand. He'd poured cursed energy into it the moment he saw the shadow grin. The baton felt like intent made solid. He swung, not at Stain's skull. At the wrongness behind him. The curse behind Stain twisted, and Izuku's baton cut through the air. And connected. For an instant, the alley went colder. A sound like wet fabric tearing. The shadow grin recoiled, furious, its mouth opening in a silent scream. Stain staggered, not from pain, but from something like sudden pressure loss. Like the air had changed and his body noticed. Stain's eyes snapped to Izuku, wild. You, he whispered. You're not using a quirk. Izuku didn't answer. Because answering meant explaining. And explaining meant losing time. Stain recovered fast, too fast, and his blade flashed again. Izuku labeled the threat, snapped Infinity up. And his headache surged, sharp as a needle behind his eyes. He couldn't hold it for long. Not like this. Not under rain, sirens, and a killer who didn't stop moving. Then, a wall of ice erupted into the alley like a god had slammed a door shut. Todoroki Shoto. He stepped in with that calm face that made it look like he never got scared, like his emotions stayed on mute. His heterochromatic eyes flicked over the fallen hero, Iida's shaking rage. Izuku's bloodless but white-knuckled grip. Then they landed on Stain. Stain laughed softly. Ah, another talented child wasting power in a corrupt world. Todoroki didn't respond. He just attacked. Ice shot forward. Fire flashed. The alley became a blender of extremes. And through it all, Izuku kept seeing the curse behind Stain, shrinking slightly now, its grin less confident. As if starving without direct contact. So that was the truth. Stain fed it. His ideology fed it. His hatred fed it. And Izuku. Izuku could hurt it, but not destroy it fully, not like Kuros did. Not yet. Stain moved like a knife between raindrops, slashing at openings. He nicked Iida. A tiny cut. A single droplet of blood splashed onto the pavement. Stain's eyes sharpened. He darted. Izuku flicked Infinity in front of the droplet's path like a madman trying to block a molecule. Too late. Stain's tongue flicked out. The taste. Iida's body locked instantly, muscles seizing. His eyes went wide, furious and helpless. No. Izuku choked. Stain stepped toward Iida with his knife raised, voice low and reverent. This is what happens to the unworthy. Izuku's chest pressure surged, violent and cold. Infinity tried to spread wide, to banish the whole world. He forced it down with sheer will. Label. Decide. Stain was a threat, but the alley wasn't. Todoroki wasn't. Iida wasn't. Izuku needed precision. He took one step forward, snapped infinity between Stain and Iida like a sheet of law. Stain's knife stopped inches from Iida's throat. Stain pushed harder, teeth bared. The blade didn't move. Izuku's vision blurred at the edges. His nose warmed. Blood threatened. He didn't let it. He breathed. In. 2. 3. Out. 2. 3. Then Todoroki's fire flared, forcing Stain back, breaking the rhythm. Stain retreated a step, eyes still locked on Izuku, eyes bright with a terrifying kind of joy. "You're dangerous," Stain said softly. Izuku swallowed, voice shaking. "Stop." Stain smiled. "Make me." He vanished into motion again. But sirens slammed closer now, loud enough to shake the alley itself. Pro-heroes were arriving. Real ones. Not students. Stain clicked his tongue, annoyed. He took one last look at Izuku, like he was memorizing him, and then he leapt up the alley wall, vanishing into the rain-soaked rooftops like a ghost. The moment Stain left, the shadow grin behind him, what was left of it, snapped. Fraying like rotten cloth, it dissolved into the wet air with a final, hungry hiss. Izuku's knees nearly buckled. Infinity dropped. The world rushed back in. 2. Doroki stared at him for a second too long. Iida's paralysis ended, and he collapsed forward, shaking, rage cracking into horror. I tried to kill him," Iida whispered. Izshooter, allowed contact, held him steady. "You didn't," Izuku said, voice hoarse. "You didn't." But his chest felt heavy. Because Izuku had done something tonight that no hero report would capture. He'd struck at a monster made of belief. And it had recognized him back. UA tightened after Hosu. Teachers became sharper. Patrols increased. Meetings happened behind closed doors. The public saw, students involved in heroic incident. Izuku saw something else. Fear spreading like mold. And fear made curses. He wanted to tell Aizawa. He almost did. He stood outside the staff room once, fingers trembling, breath caught in his throat. Then he remembered the hospital note. Don't call it a quirk. And he remembered how Manuel hadn't been able to see the leech at all. He walked away. That night, Kuros came. They sat in his desk chair like it was their throne of bad news. "You met Stain," Kuros said. Izuku's throat tightened. "Yeah." Kuros tilted their head. "And you saw the rot around him." Izuku nodded, voice small. It wasn't just him. It was, feeding on what he believed. Kuros's voice stayed calm. "Yes. Some people don't just create negativity. They create meaning. That's richer." Izuku swallowed. "I hit it with the baton." Kuros nodded once. "Good. It didn't die," Izuku admitted. "It wasn't yours to kill," Kuros said. "Not yet." Izuku's jaw clenched. "Then when?" Kuros leaned forward slightly. "When you can output without hemorrhaging." Izuku flinched. "Blue. You're still bleeding," Kuros cut in. Izuku looked away, embarrassed. "I'm trying." "I know," Kuros said, not unkind. "That's why we shift training." Izuku blinked. "Shift." Kuros raised 2 fingers. "Reverse." Izuku's stomach dropped. "Reverse curse technique." Kuros nodded. "Not full regeneration. Not miracles." They tapped Izuku's forehead gently. "Just enough to stop your brain from tearing itself apart when you push." Izuku swallowed hard. "How do I learn that?" Kuros's answer was simple and horrible. "You learn to turn pain into precision." Izuku stared. Kuros stood. "Forest training camp is next." Izuku blinked. "You know about." "Of course," Kuros said, already moving toward the window. "And if I'm right, something is going to come for your class when you're tired." Izuku's blood went cold. "The League." Kuros paused on the ledge, head tilted. "Not just villains," they said. "Curses love tired heroes." Then Kuros stepped out and vanished into the night. Izuku sat there for a long time, staring at the open window. And deep in his chest, the pressure stirred, not hungry. Alert. The forest training camp started like a normal school trip. Buses, snacks, loud classmates, Kaminari yelling about, training in nature, Kirishima hyping everyone up, Mina dancing in her seat like she had music in her bones. Izuku smiled and nodded and tried to feel normal. But as the city faded behind them and trees swallowed the road, his skin prickled. The air out here was colder. Older. Not haunted in a ghost story way. Haunted in a human way. Forests held secrets. Campgrounds held fear. And this place, remote, isolated, felt like it had swallowed too many panicked breaths over the years. When the bus stopped, the instructors were waiting. Vlad King, Aizawa, and a group of pros who looked like they could break mountains. Then the real trainer appeared. Wild pussycats. Loud, cheerful, deceptively terrifying. They didn't ease the students in. They threw them into the woods like training was a war. Get to the lodge, Mandalay shouted. If you can't survive the forest, you can't survive villains. Students screamed and scattered. Izuku ran too, heart pounding, backpack bouncing. The forest swallowed sound. Branches clawed, roots tripped, shadows pulled between trees. And under all of it, Izuku felt it, that faint static, that crawling chill. Not one curse, many, small, weak ones, leeches and larvae, feeding on the students' fear like mosquitoes. Most of them didn't attack. They just followed. Izuku's chest pressure stirred, wanting to snap infinity at everything. He didn't label, decide. Not every fear deserved a wall. He ran hard, lungs burning, body reinforced just enough with CE to keep his ankles from snapping on roots. A student screamed nearby as something jumped out, probably just a boar. But Izuku saw the shadow behind it. A tiny curse face, laughing. It wasn't the boar that scared the kid. It was the fear feeding itself. Izuku clenched his jaw and kept moving. When he reached the lodge hours later, exhausted and filthy, he collapsed on the wooden steps like he'd been reborn. The teachers called it a success. The students called it torture. Izuku stared at the treeline and thought, this forest is hungry. That night, as everyone ate and argued and complained in the lodge, Izuku noticed Aizawa watching the treeline too. Not like a man watching for bears. Like a man watching for something he couldn't name. Aizawa's eyes flicked toward Izuku for half a second. Izuku looked away first. Guilt tasted bitter. The attack came after midnight. It started with a sound that didn't belong in a forest. A roar of metal. The lodge's lights flickered. Students jolted awake. Shouts filled the hallway. Izuku rolled out of bed, heart hammering, already feeling the cold pressure surge like a storm behind his ribs. Aizawa's voice barked from outside. Everyone out. Now. The air outside was chaos, flashes of quirks. Trees snapping, smoke curling between trunks. Villains. The League. And something else. Izuku saw it immediately. The forest's fear, students, villains, teachers, was pooling into shapes in the dark. Curses were forming faster than they should. Fat shadows in the treeline. Grinning mouths. Hands. Too many hands. Izuku's blood ran cold. Because it felt like the stadium again. Like something had planned this. Bakugo's voice cut through the night, furious. Come on then. Kirishima shouted. Protect the others. Uraraka grabbed Izuku's sleeve. Midoriya, what's happening? Izuku didn't have time to explain. A villain lunged, muscle and knives and wild eyes. Izuku labeled. Threat. Infinity snapped on. The knife stopped inches from his chest. The villain's eyes widened in confusion, then rage. What is that? Izuku shoved him back. Physical shove, not technique, because Infinity didn't push, it denied. Then a second villain attacked from the side. Izuku flickered Infinity again, but his focus split. His headache surged. Too many angles. Too many threats. Too much fear in the air. And in the shadows behind the villains, a curse unfurled like a banner. Big. Hungry. Smiling. It lunged not at Izuku. At a screaming student behind him. Because curses didn't care about hero-villain lines. They cared about fear. Izuku's heart lurched. He spun, and for the first time in public since the festival. He forced the technique he wasn't ready for. Blue. He didn't pull the curse. He pulled the space in front of it, collapsed distance like yanking a rug. The curse jerked sideways, missing the student by inches and slamming into a tree instead, splattering shadow. Izuku's nose burst instantly. Warm blood ran down his lip. His vision blurred. He swayed. Uraraka shouted his name. Izuku wiped his nose with his sleeve, furious at himself. Sloppy. Fear makes it sloppy. The villains pressed harder. Smoke. Explosions. Screams. And somewhere in the chaos, Izuku heard it. A low laugh that didn't belong to any human throat. The big curse in the trees was enjoying this. Enjoying him struggling. Izuku's chest pressure surged again, and for a terrifying second Infinity begged to spread wide. To make him untouchable and safe and alone. He refused. He forced his breathing. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. Then pain stabbed behind his eyes so hard he nearly vomited. He was bleeding too far. He was going to collapse, and if he collapsed, someone would die. Izuku's hands trembled, and in that tremble, Kuros's lesson hit him like a brick. Reverse it. Not for comfort, for survival. Izuku clenched his jaw so hard it hurt. He grabbed the cold pressure inside his chest, the ugly energy born from fear, and tried to do the impossible. Turn it into something that didn't destroy him. For a split second, it felt like trying to bend a hurricane. Then something shifted. Not dramatic, not bright, just warm. A faint warmth spread behind his eyes, like cool cloth on a fever. The stabbing pain eased a fraction. His vision sharpened. The nosebleed slowed, not stopped, but slowed enough that he could breathe. Izuku gasped, stunned. Reverse curse technique. Not mastered, not pretty, but alive. And because he was still standing, he could still move. He snapped Infinity up to protect Uraraka and Tsuyu as they retreated. He used a tiny blue burst to pull a falling branch away from a student. He didn't try to be Gojo. He tried to be Izuku, the kid who saved people even when the scoreboard didn't care. Then a shout tore through the night. Bakugo. Izuku's blood went cold. He turned, and saw it. Smoke. Villains. A warp-like distortion. Bakugo fighting like a demon. And hands, real hands, grabbing him. Not a curse this time. The League. They were taking him. Izuku moved on instinct, and the big curse in the trees grinned wider, as if this was the moment it wanted. Because kidnapping didn't just create fear. It created despair. A perfect ingredient. Izuku sprinted, heartbeat roaring. He labeled threat after threat, flickering infinity like a heartbeat. He reached out, and then, for a horrifying second, he felt the world tilt. Because he realized something awful. If he turned infinity on too wide, he couldn't grab Bakugo. He couldn't pull him back. He'd lock himself out of the one thing he needed, touch. Izuku's chest pressure surged. His vow caught him again. Label. Decide. He chose. He turned infinity off, for one heartbeat, just long enough to reach. Just long enough to grab. His fingers brushed Bakugo's sleeve. And then the warp swallowed him. Go vanished into the smoke like a stolen flame. Izuku stumbled forward, empty hand shaking, rain mixing with blood at his lip. The forest went quiet in the way a room goes quiet after a scream. Somewhere in the trees, the big curse exhaled like it had just been fed. Izuku stood there, shaking, and felt the question claw up from the dark part of his chest. How do you save someone, when saving them requires you to stop protecting yourself? Bakugo was gone. That fact didn't land all at once. It arrived in pieces, like shrapnel. The empty space where his yelling should have been. The way Kirishima's hands shook when he tried to stand up straight. The way Aizawa's face didn't change, but his eyes looked older by 10 years. And the way the forest itself felt, satisfied. Like something unseen had just swallowed a meal. By dawn, Class 1A sat in a half-circle near the lodge, wrapped in blankets and shock. Teachers spoke in hard, controlled voices. Police arrived. Pros scanned the woods for anything they could punch into making sense. Izuku sat with dried blood on his sleeve and a knot in his chest that didn't loosen no matter how many times he breathed. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. It didn't help. Because this time, the fear wasn't about getting hurt. It was about failing. Uraraka sat beside him, eyes puffy. They'll get him back, she whispered, like saying it enough times could make it true. Izuku nodded because he couldn't speak. His throat felt stuffed with guilt. If I'd reached a second sooner. His mind tried to calculate it like it was math. Like time could be solved. But time didn't care. Aizawa walked past them, speaking quietly with Vlad King. The capture scarf dragged slightly, damp with rain and soot. Aizawa's gaze flicked to Izuku. Not angry. Just heavy. Izuku looked away. Kuros came that night. Izuku hadn't even bothered closing his window anymore. It felt pointless to pretend his room belonged only to him. The air cooled. The desk chair creaked. Kuros sat like always, calm, composed. Irritatingly unshaken by the fact that a kid had just lived through a kidnapping. You used reverse, Kuros said. Izuku's jaw clenched. Barely. Kuros nodded. Good. Izuku's hands curled into fists. Bakugo got taken. Kuros didn't react emotionally. I know. That made Izuku snap. You knew. Kuros tilted their head. I predicted. Izuku's voice cracked. That's not the same. You could have warned, you could have. You would have told your teachers, Kuros said quietly. Izuku froze. Kuros continued. They would have prepared for villains. Not for what the fear would create. Izuku's chest tightened. So you let it happen. Kuros's voice stayed calm. I didn't cause it. I didn't stop it. Izuku stared at them, shaking. His heart wanted to hate them. But deep down, he knew Kuros wasn't wrong. Hero society didn't even have words for curses. Kuros leaned forward slightly. You feel guilty. Izuku's throat tightened. Yes. Kuros nodded once. Good. Izuku blinked, furious. Good. Guilt is proof you still care, Kuros replied. The day you stop feeling guilty is the day your technique becomes your personality. Izuku swallowed hard. Kuros's glasses caught a sliver of streetlight. Now, listen. Izuku's hands trembled. Kuros's voice sharpened. Your problem is not that you're weak. Izuku laughed bitterly. It kind of is. Kuros ignored him. Your problem is that you only know how to deny. Izuku stared. Infinity. Kuros nodded. Infinity says, no. Izuku's chest pressure pulsed faintly, as if agreeing. Kuros continued. Blue says, come. Izuku's throat tightened. And it makes me bleed. Yes, Kuros said flatly. Because you're forcing precision through a blunt instrument. Izuku swallowed. Kuros raised 2 fingers again. So we add the third. Izuku's skin prickled. Third. Kuros's voice was quiet, almost reverent. Reversal. Red. The word hit Izuku like a gust of heat. Red. Push. Repulsion. If blue was pulling space inward, then red was. Izuku's breath caught. Pushing it out. Kuros nodded. Correct. But red isn't just push. It's blue reversed through positive flow. Izuku frowned. Positive. Kuros tapped Izuku's forehead again. Reverse curse technique. Positive energy. You already touched it last night. Izuku's stomach dropped. So red needs that. Yes, Kuros said. Which is why most people die trying. Izuku went very still. Kuros's tone didn't soften. If you want to push back curses and villains without relying on infinity to stall, you need a way to project force. Izuku swallowed hard. I'm not ready. Kuros's head tilted. You will be. Izuku shook his head. Bakugo is out there. The League is out there. I can't just. Kuros cut in, voice calm and sharp. Do you think you can chase them right now? Izuku froze. Kuros's question landed like a hook in his ribs. Izuku wanted to say yes. But his body remembered the forest, bleeding, wobbling, barely keeping up. He whispered, no. Kuros nodded once. Then you train. Izuku clenched his jaw so hard it hurt. How? Kuros reached into their coat and produced 2 objects. The baton, matte black steel. And another marble. This one wasn't glossy. It looked like dried blood turned to stone. The moment it touched Izuku's desk, his room felt heavier, like the air gained weight. Izuku's skin crawled. That one's stronger, Izuku whispered. Kuros nodded. It was born from regret. The marble cracked. Something unfolded, taller than before. A shape like a person in a cloak, except its cloak was made of writhing hands. Its fact a smile carved too wide. Izuku's chest pressure surged violently. Infinity wanted to slam on like a door. He caught it. Label. Decide. Threat. Yes. But the lesson. Kuros's voice was quiet. Do not use infinity. Izuku stared at them like they'd lost their mind. Kuros didn't blink. If you want to learn red, you can't hide behind. No. The curse took one step forward and the room seemed to dim around it. Izuku's throat tightened. It's coming at me. Kuros's voice stayed calm. Good. That's honest. Izuku swallowed. He lowered his hands and let the cold pressure in his chest rise without forming infinity. No rule. No barrier. Just energy. The curse lunged. Izuku's heart screamed. Kuros's fingers snapped once. The curse halted mid-air as if the world had grabbed it by the throat. Kuros held it suspended like they were holding a leash. You have 2 seconds of safety, Kuros said. Use them. Izuku's mouth went dry. How? Kuros's voice sharpened. You make blue. Izuku's eyes widened. Blue makes me bleed. Do it anyway, Kuros said. Izuku's hands trembled. He focused on the space in front of his palm, like before. He tried to dent it. The air shivered. He felt the pull begin. and his nose immediately warmed. Blood. But he didn't stop. He pushed through the pain, pulling space inward like gathering a fist. A tiny sphere of warped air formed in front of his palm, subtle, invisible to normal eyes. But Izuku could feel it like pressure against his skin. Kuros's voice cut in. Now reverse it. Izuku's breath caught. Reverse. He remembered the forest, how pain flipped into warmth. How the stabbing behind his eyes eased when he turned the flow. He clenched his jaw and tried to force that same inversion, taking the ugly energy and twisting it into something that didn't destroy him. For a second, nothing happened. Then his chest pressure changed. It didn't get smaller. It got cleaner, warmer. Izuku's eyes widened. The sphere in front of his palm snapped. Not inward, outward. A pulse. Not a blast like Bakugo's explosions. More like space itself shoved away, offended at being compressed. The air boomed. Izuku flew backward into his bed like someone had punched him with the concept of distance. The windows rattled. The walls vibrated. And the suspended curse got launched across the room like a rag doll. It smashed into the far wall with a wet, tearing sound and splattered into black dust. Izuku lay half-sprawled on his bed, gasping. His nose bled hard. His head felt like it had been struck by lightning. But he was alive, and the curse was gone. Kuros stood perfectly still, as if none of this impressed them. Red, they said. Izuku coughed. I did it. Kuros nodded once. You survived it. Izuku's vision swam. That was insane. Kuros's voice was flat. That was weak. Izuku stared at them in disbelief. Kuros continued. A true red would have erased half your room. Your version was a shove. Izuku laughed weakly, then winced because laughing hurt. A shove that threw me into my bed. Kuros's head tilted. You lacked anchoring. Izuku wiped his nose with shaking fingers. Anchoring. Stance, Kuros said. Intent. Vector. Izuku groaned. So I did it wrong. You did it alive, Kuros replied. That's step one. Izuku stared at his hands, still trembling. He felt something else too, the warmth from the reversed flow lingering faint. Tly behind his eyes like a healing ember. Red had required reverse. Reverse had steadied him. That meant, Izuku looked up. If I can learn reverse better, I can use red without breaking. Kuros nodded. Correct. Izuku's jaw clenched. Then I'll learn it. Kuros stared at him for a beat. Why? Izuku's throat tightened. Because the answer wasn't, to be strong. It wasn't, to win. It was the image of Bakugo vanishing into smoke. It was the sound of Uraraka crying quietly into her blanket. It was Iida shaking with shame in Hosu. It was the thought that fear was feeding something in the dark right now, growing bigger. Izuku whispered, so I can push back. Kuros nodded once. Good. They moved toward the window. Izuku sat up, still dizzy. Kuros, why do curses keep showing up near me? Kuros paused on the ledge. For a long moment, they didn't speak. Then they said something that made Izuku's blood run colder than any curse. Because you're not just wielding limitless. Izuku swallowed. What do you mean? Kuros's voice was quiet. You're becoming a focal point. Izuku's stomach dropped. A focal point for negativity, Kuros finished. For fear. For meaning. They glanced back at him. And for something older than both. Izuku stared, heart hammering. Older. Kuros didn't answer. They stepped out into the night and vanished. Izuku sat there in the shaking quiet of his room. Blood drying on his sleeve, chest pressure humming like a storm behind a dam. He'd learned red. Barely. And it had cost him. But now he knew something else. Infinity wasn't his only answer. He could deny. He could pull. And now, he could push. Which meant when the world came for him again, he wouldn't just be untouchable. He'd be unstoppable. The next day at UA, the mood was grim. Teachers spoke in clipped tones. Students whispered about Bakugo, about villains, about how close it all was. Izuku walked through the hallway with his head down, focusing on breathing. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. Then he felt it. A chill. Not from air conditioning. From something standing too close. Izuku stopped. Across the hall, a student he didn't recognize stared at him. Eyes dull, posture stiff, smile too wide. Like a person trying to imitate normal. Izuku's chest pressure rose, alert. And behind the student's shadow. A thin grin. Not as big as Stain's. Not as hungry as the forest. But watching, measuring, learning, Izuku's hand drifted toward his pocket where the baton wasn't. He didn't bring it to school. He wasn't allowed. He swallowed and forced himself to label. Threat. The student blinked, slow. Then turned and walked away like nothing happened. Izuku stood still, heart pounding. Because now it wasn't just random. Something was testing him in daylight. And if curses were learning to hide inside people, then Hero Society was walking around with monsters in its shadows. Izuku clenched his jaw. He'd learned red. Now he had to learn the one thing that might matter more than any technique. How to see the enemy before anyone else even knew there was a fight. The weeks after the forest weren't a recovery. They were a tightening. UA installed more security. Teach. ERS watched students like they were all potential weak points. Class 1A spoke softer, laughed less, and checked their phones more, like the world might send a message that made everything normal again. It didn't. Bakugo was still missing. And inside Izuku, something had shifted. Red had changed him. Not the power itself, the price did. He could still feel that moment, space pushing back so hard it threw him across his own room. The warm inversion behind his eyes, the taste of blood, the fact that he'd survived it. It gave him confidence, which was dangerous, because confidence was the kind of emotion that made you take risks. And risks made mistakes. And mistakes, for Izuku, didn't just mean bruises. They meant curses. He'd started noticing them everywhere. Not big ones. Not dramatic. Little things. A smear in a hallway corner that vanished when he looked directly. A strange heaviness near the nurse's office where students cried quietly after bad news. A cold patch near the staff room where adults argued behind closed doors. Like UA had always been haunted, and Izuku had only just learned how to see. He didn't sleep well anymore. Even when he was exhausted, his chest pressure stayed half awake, had never lay down. And then, one afternoon, he felt it again. That wrong student. The one with the too wide smile. Izuku saw them near the vending machines, standing still like they were waiting for something. Or someone. Izuku slowed, heart pounding. The student turned their head in a way that was too smooth, too deliberate, eyes locking on Izuku. They smiled. And Izuku saw the shadow behind them flicker. A thin grin. A mouth that wasn't a mouth. It wasn't attacking. It was observing. Izuku's chest pressure stirred, cold and sharp. He whispered, almost without meaning to, threat. Infinity flickered on. The air tightened. And the student's smile widened. Like it enjoyed being acknowledged. Then it spoke. Not with words. With a feeling. A sudden spike of dread that didn't belong to Izuku. The hallway lights seemed dimmer for a heartbeat. Izuku's skin crawled. It's projecting fear. He swallowed hard, forced breathing. In. 2. 3. Out. 2. 3. The dread didn't fully go away, but it stopped growing. The student, no, the thing in their shadow, tilted its head as if curious. Then the student turned and walked toward a side corridor that led to a staff-only stairwell. Izuku hesitated. He should tell Aizawa. He should tell someone. But if he did, what would he say? There's a grin in someone's shadow and it feels like a lie. He could already hear the response. Confusion, concern, containment. They'd put him under more review. They'd tighten his chains again. And meanwhile, whatever this was would keep learning. Izuku's jaw clenched. He followed. Quietly. Carefully. He kept infinity off, because he needed to be able to touch door handles, open stairwell rails, move like a normal person. But he kept the vow ready in his mind like a trigger. Label. Decide. He trailed the student down the stairwell. Down. Down. Past floors students weren't supposed to access. The air got colder with each step. Not air conditioning cold. Cave cold. Old cold. Like the building's foundation remembered panic. The student stopped at a door marked maintenance, authorized only. They reached out and opened it without hesitation. The door shouldn't have opened. There should have been locks, alarms, cameras. But the door swung inward like it was eager. Izuku swallowed and stepped closer. The air beyond the door smelled like damp concrete and dust. And something else. Rot. Not physical rot. Emotional rot. The kind you felt in the back of your throat when you walked into a room after someone had cried for hours. Izuku's chest pressure surged. He labeled before he even saw it. Threat. Infinity snapped on. He stepped through the door. And the world changed. The maintenance corridor wasn't a corridor. Not anymore. It stretched too far. The walls looked like UA's concrete. But the angles were wrong, corners bending inward like the building was swallowing itself. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed above, but their light didn't reach the floor. The floor wasn't tile. It was black water. Shallow. Still. Reflecting Izuku's face like a mirror. But his reflection smiled a fraction too wide. Izuku's breath hitched. His chest pressure roared. He realized, with a sick twist, that he wasn't walking in a place. He was walking in a boundary. A pocket. A space where negativity had been compressed until reality got thin. A curse's nest. And the student stood ahead, motionless. Their shadow peeled off the floor and stood upright like a cloak rising. The grin widened. The student's body slumped like a puppet whose strings had been cut. And the thing that had been hiding revealed itself fully. It wasn't huge like the overpass monster. It wasn't a parasite like the leech. It was refined. A humanoid shape made of layered shadows, wearing the suggestion of a school uniform like it was mocking UA's identity. Its face was a smooth mask with a carved smile and empty eyes. And behind it, hands, many hands, floated like a halo, fingers twitching. Izuku's stomach flipped. This wasn't random. This was intentional. A curse that understood people. Understood institutions. Understood how to hide in daylight until the moment it wanted you alone. Izuku whispered, "You've been following me." The curse tilted its head. Then it spoke, this time with a voice that sounded like multiple whispers stitched together. "You make the air taste different." Izuku's skin crawled. "You're a curse," Izuku said. Voice shaking. The curse's grin widened. A word. It stepped closer. Izuku's infinity held it back automatically, space denying its approach. The curse stopped inches from the invisible gap and stared. "Infinite," it whispered, almost reverent. "Lonely." Izuku's chest tightened. The thing knew. It knew infinity's nature, the isolating hunger of, "No one can reach me." Izuku swallowed hard. "What do you want?" Quote. The curse's hands twitched like excited insects. "To see what happens when your no becomes a cage." Izuku's vision blurred at the edges. The black water at his feet rippled outward. And suddenly, the corridor wasn't just longer. It was endless. Izuku turned. The door was gone. Behind him was only more corridor, more flickering light, more black water reflecting a smiling version of himself. Izuku's throat tightened. "It trapped me," he whispered. The curse nodded slowly. "Domain." Izuku's heart slammed. Domain expansion. He'd thought it was a fantasy. A concept from the notes and the whispers of Kuros's training. But standing here, inside a pocket of warped space, Izuku understood. A domain wasn't an attack. It was a declaration. A space where someone's rules became reality. Izuku's hands trembled. If the curse could make a domain, then it wasn't just feeding anymore. It was evolving. The curse stepped closer again, confident. Infinity stop. It again, still absolute in front of Izuku. But then the curse smiled like it had anticipated that. One of the floating hands pointed at Izuku. The black water beneath Izuku's feet suddenly surged upward like it had become alive. Hands formed from the liquid, grabbing, pulling, clinging to his ankles, his calves, his knees. Izuku yelped and tried to step back. Infinity did nothing. Because the hands weren't approaching him from outside. They were already touching him from the inside. The domain was rewriting proximity. Izuku's stomach dropped. Infinity was a defense against approach. But inside a domain, the enemy didn't need to approach. They simply declared, "You are already in my reach." Izuku's breath hitched. The hands climbed higher. His chest pressure surged, panicked. He tried to label. Threat. Yes. All threat. Infinity flared wider out of desperation, trying to deny everything. The air around him chilled. The corridor's lights flickered violently. The black water stopped moving for a heartbeat. As if the domain itself was resisting. But then the hands pulled harder. Izuku's headache spiked like a nail through his skull. He tasted blood. He couldn't let infinity be his only answer. Not here. Not inside a cage made of someone else's rules. Izuku clenched his jaw. Blue. He focused through the pain, ignoring the blood warming his lip. He pulled space in front of him, trying to collapse distance toward the curse. The air dented. But the domain warped it. The pull didn't go forward. It went sideways, yanking the corridor itself like it was made of rubber. Izuku stumbled, nearly falling. The curse laughed in whispers. Your space listens, but it listens to me too. Izuku's stomach twisted. He needed a rule stronger than the curses. A declaration bigger than its domain. He needed red. No. Red was a push. But the hands were already on him. Reverse. He forced warmth behind his eyes, trying to keep his brain from tearing. The pain eased slightly. But the hands kept climbing. And then Izuku realized the terrifying truth. If he didn't end this quickly, he would be dragged under. Not killed. Worse. He would be stuck of fear, endlessly feeding the thing with his panic. It would learn him. It would wear him. It would send him back as a smile. Izuku's breathing turned ragged. In. 2. 3. Out. 2. 3. He forced the rhythm like a lifeline. Then he remembered Kuros's words from the very first night. You're holding a chainsaw by the blade. He'd tried so hard not to become a disaster. But maybe this was the moment to stop being polite. Izuku looked at the curse through the flickering light and whispered, voice trembling but sharp. You want to see my cage? The curse tilted its head, curious. Izuku clenched his fists. He didn't picture a barrier. He didn't picture a wall. He pictured an idea. Limitless wasn't just infinity. It wasn't just blue or red. It was the right to manipulate space itself. To define distance, approach, connection. And if a domain was a declaration of rules, then Izuku needed to declare his own. He swallowed blood. He forced reverse cursed technique harder, warmth flooding behind his eyes, stabilizing the pain. He gathered blue, compression, into one hand. Trembling. He gathered red, reversal, into the other, hot and sharp. He felt both at once, like holding two storms. His whole body shook. Because combining them wasn't strong. It was unstable. But he didn't have a choice. He whispered, barely audible. Domain. The corridor shuddered. The curse's grin widened in delight. Izuku's voice broke. Expansion. The air snapped. For one heartbeat, everything went silent. No buzzing lights. No rippling water. No whispering laughter. Just blank, infinite quiet. Then, the world cracked open. Izuku's domain didn't explode outward like a battlefield. It swallowed inward like a thought. The maintenance corridor dissolved into white. Not light, space. An endless, sterile expanse like the inside of a blank page. The black water vanished. The hands on Izuku evaporated like smoke. The curse froze, suddenly less confident, like a predator that had stepped into a trap and realized the trap was smarter. Izuku stood in the white void, breathing hard. Blood on his lip, eyes wide. The curse stared at him. What is, it whispered. Izuku's voice came out shaky. Limitless. The curse trembled. Because in Izuku's domain, there was only one rule. Everything that approaches him is forced to experience infinite distance. Not just physically. Conceptually. Every motion toward him was divided into smaller and smaller steps that never reached completion. Every intent to harm him got stretched into meaninglessness. Even the curse's presence felt like it was being slowed, like its own existence couldn't fully arrive. The curse's hands reached out. And slowed. And slowed. And slowed. Never touching. Never closing. The curse's grin began to crack. Lonely, it tried to whisper again. Izuku's eyes stung. Yeah, Izuku breathed. It is. The curse's mask trembled. Izuku lifted the baton, CE pouring into it, steady and sharp. He walked forward. And for the first time, he understood the horrifying power of a domain. Inside your rules, you decide what distance means. He wasn't being approached now. He was the one moving. He was the one closing the gap. The curse tried to retreat. But retreating in an endless void was meaningless. It couldn't escape because there was nowhere to go that wasn't still inside Izuku's rules. Its hands flailed. Its grin cracked wider, turning into something like panic. Izuku's breath shook. This was it. If he struck it here, in his domain, it would be removed cleanly. No civilians. No confusion. No hiding. Just him and the monster. And the question that rose like bile in his throat. Am I becoming the kind of thing that decides who lives? Izuku hesitated. And in that hesitation, the curse's voice slipped through, soft and poisonous. If you kill me, you'll be alone forever. Izuku's chest tightened. Because some part of him believed it. Some part of him wanted the safety of being untouchable. Wanted the quiet. Wanted to stop being hurt. He closed his eyes. And saw Bakugo's sleeve slipping through his fingers. Saw Uraraka's face when she realized Bakugo was gone. Saw Iida shaking with shame. Saw the civilian in Hosu crying because he didn't understand what had possessed him. Izuku opened his eyes. His voice was small, but steady. I'd rather be lonely than let you eat people. Then he swung. The baton connected with the curse's mask. A sharp, clean crack. The curse shattered like black glass. Its shadow threads unraveled and vanished into the white void. Gone. For good. Izuku stood there, breathing hard, baton lowered, blood dripping from his lip. The white void trembled. A domain wasn't meant to last long without efficiency. Without 6 eyes. Izuku's head screamed. His vision blurred. He forced reverse, warmth, just to stay upright. Then he whispered, release. The white void collapsed. The corridor snapped back into place. Concrete walls. Flickering lights. Dusty air. Izuku fell to one knee, gasping. The student's body lay crumpled nearby, unconscious but alive. The maintenance door reappeared at the corridor's end, real again. Izuku wiped his nose, blood smeared on his sleeve. His hands shook. His brain felt like it had been scrubbed raw. But the crawling chill was gone. The grin was gone. The corridor felt empty. Safe. For now. Footsteps thundered above. Someone shouting. Aizawa's voice. Midoriya. Izuku's chest tightened. He stumbled toward the door. The moment he stepped out, Aizawa was there, eyes wide, scarf twitching, posture tense like a man ready to erase reality. He took one look at Izuku, blood, shaking, eyes too focused, and his expression hardened. What happened? Aizawa demanded. Izuku opened his mouth. The truth sat behind his teeth like a bomb. Curse. Domain. Kuros. Limitless. Exorcism. He could say it. He should. But he saw the cameras down the hall. He saw teachers rushing. He saw the machinery of hero society ready to classify, contain, and misunderstand. Izuku swallowed. His voice came out hoarse. I found someone collapsed. In the maintenance corridor. Aizawa stared at him. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he said quietly, dangerously. Midoriya, you're lying. Izuku's heart hammered. Aizawa stepped closer. Not aggressive. Just close enough that Izuku felt the weight of being seen. Whatever you're dealing with, Aizawa said softly, it's getting bigger. Izuku's eyes stung. Aizawa's voice lowered further. And you can't carry it alone. Izuku's throat tightened. Because the domain had been lonely. And Aizawa, tired, harsh, brutally honest, was offering something Izuku hadn't expected. A hand reaching through the distance. Izuku's fingers trembled. He wanted to take it. But somewhere in the back of his mind, Kuros's warning echoed. Trust makes you sloppy. Izuku swallowed and whispered, I'm trying. Aizawa held his gaze. Then, without looking away, he said. After class. My office. Izuku's stomach dropped. Aizawa turned to the unconscious student and barked orders at the arriving staff. Medical. Security. Cameras. Izuku stood in the hallway, blood drying on his face, feeling like he'd just cracked open a secret that would change everything. Because the curse had known the truth. Infinity was lonely. But loneliness wasn't the worst thing. The worst thing was being alone while the world needed saving. And now, standing under UA's fluorescent lights, Izuku realized the real final battle wasn't all for one yet. It wasn't the League. It wasn't even the next curse. It was this. Could he let people get close, without letting his power make him a cage? Inko pulled he.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, share, and subscribe, and don't forget to check out my Patreon too. Until then, take care, we'll see you in the next video.